Come to order, please, and pursuant to Standing Order 1082 on the pre-budget consultations 2016, this is meeting number 7. Welcome the witnesses this morning. I know some people had quite short notice. We appreciate you making the effort. We're under a tight time frame too. Yes, we'll start with Ian Lee as an individual who's Associate Professor at Carleton University. Ian, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to present slides in one moment, but I just want to state I am a tenured professor at Carleton University School of Business since 1987, full-time teaching business, economics, and public policy. This is my 29th year at Carleton. I've taught over 100 times in developing countries, including every year in Poland since 1991 and China since 1997, the two most successful post-communist countries in transition that provide a lot of lessons in terms of economic development and so forth. I appear on my own behalf, as I do not work on behalf of lobbyists or NGOs or unions or corporations or political parties or other individuals. And finally, since 2008, I've appeared 24 times before House and Senate committees of the Parliament of Canada, including multiple times before this august committee, and I recognize the veteran, Mr. Caron. I was mentioning to him I'm, I guess, a veteran too. In the run-up to the budget, you'll receive numerous submissions from what Captain Renault and Casablanca called the usual gang of suspects, with long shopping lists of millions and billions of dollars. I will not do that today. I'm going to do something completely different, following Prime Minister Trudeau's excellent statement that policy must be evidence-based. So I will now provide some empirical data on the graphs that deconstruct some urban legends that are being touted regularly in the media by pundits, sometimes by elected officials, as the budget must be grounded on empirical reality and not on snake oil or quicksand. So I will start and just by stating that Canada, as we all know, has experienced a temporary, and I underline the word temporary, oil shock. The economy is growing, albeit slowly. This year it's forecast to grow at 1.5. That's positive 1.5. Next year over 2%. There's already massive monetary stimulus slooshing around the system because of the historically unprecedented low rate interest rates. And there's $30 billion right now as we speak being pumped into the Canadian economy, representing the annual provincial deficits in aggregate across Canada. I want to deal with urban legend 1. I've heard NGOs and some elected officials say that we're a one-trick pony, completely relying on, dependent on oil and gas. This is one of the biggest urban legends of all. I deconstruct it as often as I can. This is a very fresh graph. It's only 2 weeks old, posted by StatsCan. It breaks down the totality of Canada's economy into sectors ranked by employment. I'm not going to read through the list. I just simply want to highlight that the totality of all Canadians working in natural resources, that's where we're all allegedly working, is 370,000 Canadians, 1/3 of 1 million. By contrast, 16 million of 18 million employed Canadians are working downstream in the services, plural, sectors, and that includes education like me, 1.3 million of me running around, 1 million in financial services, 2.7 million employed in healthcare. I can go on and on. We are one of the most diversified economies in the entire world alongside the United States. So when people say we're not diversified, they are not evidence-based. So we can discount that urban legend. Another is that we're running into great, very bad times, and we're very poor, or we're about to be. This is simply not true. We are one of the richest, most affluent countries on the planet Earth, somewhere around the 10th wealthiest in the world, ranked by GDP per person on a PPP, that's purchasing power parity basis, which is the proper way to do it. As you can see, there's the graph showing that we're in the top 10 countries of about 200 countries in the world. Another urban legend is that the middle class is in collapse, it's shrinking, it's disappearing, and it's vanishing. This is simply not true. And this is Stephen Gordon's graph. You're all aware of Professor Gordon from Laval, from CanSim table. And again, I'm not going to belabor this. Yes, it collapsed, dropped very dramatically in the 90s because of the historic downsizing. It was the largest downsizing in Canadian history, but it recovered since then. Another we're hearing all the time from the NGOs is that inequality is exploding in Canada. And yet people refuse to do comparative empirical research. This is OECD data. It's unimpeachable. And it's showing that we are almost smack dab on the OECD average. This idea that we're an extreme outlier is simply empirically false. I'm not suggesting we shouldn't do more about each of these urban legends, that we can't do more to reduce inequality, but we have to start from facts and not from urban legends. Another is, and I receive emails from NGOs who get angry at me talking about this. Andrew Coyne has also talked about this in his columns. Poverty has collapsed in this country over the last 50 years. Collapsed. It was 25% in the mid-60s when I was a child growing up in Eastern Ontario. 25% of Canadians were below the poverty line. Today it's 8.8%. That's under both Liberal and Conservative administrations. This is completely nonpartisan. We are doing an extraordinary job at reducing poverty. Parallel with that is the idea that
Mr.
elders,
Lee,
I'm not an elder yet, but I'm about 2 years away.
Just to interrupt, we are trying to hold people to 5 minutes, so take another minute to
Okay, I'll skate through these real quick. Elder poverty, likewise, has collapsed from very high levels to one of the lowest in the world. We're at the very bottom of the OECD. In terms of pension readiness, 83% of Canadian households are on track to retire without a problem. We do have a problem in Canada, but it's a small problem. It's a minority of 15 to 20% of working Canadians and 7% who are already retired. Elders are the wealthiest people in Canada. Senior families, StatsCan data, $650,000 net worth. So our elders are our wealthiest, not our poorest. I'll just finish up on these two, because I've heard some elected officials say that infrastructure spending has collapsed in Canada. It's actually not. It's at its long-term average of 4% of GDP. I'll skip over these very quickly. The last one I want to deal with is the municipalities, because they claim all the time they're running out of money. Municipality revenues is exploding. Their population grew 11% in the last 10 years. Their spending grew by 43% in the last 10 years. And finally, this is my final point. GHG emissions, we are told all the time we've got to be more like the Americans. We are cleaner than the United States on GHG emissions per capita. They source 20% of their energy from coal, which is the dirtiest of the filthiest of the dirty. We only source 6%. We are cleaner than the United States. We want them to emulate us. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. Turning to the Alberta Chambers of Commerce, Ken Colby. Welcome,
morning, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the committee members for inviting me this morning to present on behalf of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. For those of you that don't know, the Alberta Chambers of Commerce is a voluntary federation of 126 community chambers in the province of Alberta, who in turn represent in excess of 24,000 businesses in the province, and approximately 95% of those members are small and medium-sized enterprises. I guess what I'm here today is I'm not here to ask for money, okay? And as my colleague have mentioned earlier, I'm here to urge caution to the Government of Canada. When you're setting your budget for this coming year, be aware of the impact of cumulative effects and cumulative layering of costs on businesses. Certainly in Alberta, we're going through some issues right now with the oil industry being at a dramatic low-level price of oil. One thing that doesn't get a whole lot of press play is the small and medium-sized enterprises that are currently suffering. Those small and medium-sized enterprises go the way of the oil. And right now, they are not feeling that there's a whole lot of attention being paid to them and the issues that they're facing. I would ask you to avoid layering costs on top of business in Alberta. We are obviously feeling the effect of a low loonie, which affects input costs for most small and medium-sized enterprises. We've recently had an increased corporate tax rate going up by 2%. And again, that is only affecting large companies, some people would say. But however, small and medium-sized enterprises in the province of Alberta are fed by larger corporations, and if their corporate taxes increase, the amount of money that goes to small and medium-sized enterprises obviously decreases. We're facing uncertainty as far as our minimum wage goes. As you probably know, we're going from $10.20 to $15 an hour by the year 2018, which adds a dramatic cost onto small and medium-sized enterprises. It doesn't not only affect those who are paying at the minimum wage, but also those who are paying above minimum wage, because there's always pressure to increase. As was pointed out by the previous presenter, we're also faced with increased municipal taxes, which is all a cost that is burdened on to businesses in the province. We're also facing an increase in carbon tax. Our province has had a long-standing carbon tax that is going from $10 per ton up to $30 per ton within the next 3 years. Edmonton Chamber of Commerce had a great release just yesterday, and I would echo their words. When it comes to what the Government of Canada is doing when you're drafting your budget, stop, look both ways, and think before you tax. On the issue of infrastructure, we support targeted infrastructure stimulus spending. I would ask you, and we've heard a lot of comments around the issue of being shovel ready. I would ask you instead to be shovel smart. Look at the investments that will have a long-term economic impact. What infrastructure spending would provide long economic impact? Target those areas of the country that require stimulus and help. Rex Murphy put it about 6 or 7 years ago that when the cod fishery collapsed, the government didn't build an LRT in Saskatoon. So I would ask you again, target those areas of the country that need assistance, need a little bit of a kickstart on their economies. Obviously, coming from Alberta, the biggest infrastructure project that could go ahead that would not affect or cost the Government of Canada any money is obviously the construction of pipelines, because that would obviously put a ton of money into the economy, and it would also have we have no control over the price of gas and oil. I mean, that's a world commodity, but with access to markets other than the United States, we could maximize and receive full market value in the global marketplace. And it would have a side benefit of probably reducing the cost of energy in Eastern Canada, given the amount of oil and natural gas that's currently imported into Canada. I would use this time period that we're going through with higher unemployment rates to take the time and fix our immigration system. We need, when we rebound, and we will. In my lifetime, I've seen this rodeo about 4 times. And when we rebound, we will need access on a timely basis to immigrants that can help us with the labor shortage that we're certainly to see when we come out of this thing. Think it out and develop it right so we don't have another program where the rules are changed every 6 months. Our full submission is available on the website at abchamber.ca. We've also submitted a full copy. I believe the committee's received it. And again, I would sum up my presentation by do no harm in this budget, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Colby. And the submission that you submitted will be transmitted to all members after it's translated. So thank you very much. A lot of good information there. Canadian Association of University Teachers. I'm going to have to get you to pronounce your name, Sylvain. Sylvain. Pleased to meet you. Go ahead.
Merci, monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Today, I'd like to thank you for giving us the opportunity to share our suggestions for the next federal budget on behalf of the 60,000 university professors, library researchers, staff working in over 120 universities and colleges throughout the country. Our association advocates for improving the quality of post-secondary education, increasing access, and defending academic freedom.
Against science and scientists, Canada needs a new vision to get science right and improve accessibility and quality of post-secondary education. CAUT welcomes the new government commitments to unmuzzle government scientists, to make government science fully available to the public, and to ensure that scientific analysis are considered in decision-making. CAUT applauds the restoring of the long-form census. We were also pleased to see that the new science minister's mandate includes the examinations of option to strengthen the recognition and support for fundamental research. For years, CAUT has been raising concerns about the former government's direction in science policy that favored narrowed commercial interest at the expense of basic research and the broader public interest. It is now clear that this strategy has not delivered the promised investments and jobs, and Canada is falling behind other developed countries in science and innovation. More needs to be done to rebuild Canada's research capacity, starting with more investment in basic research. And infusions of $3 billion of new research and development money would be needed in this country right now today to bring us back to what was spent in 2006 level. Now is the time for the federal government to invest in Canada's knowledge infrastructure and boost Canada's scientific capacity. More precisely, CAUT recommends that in this year's budget, the federal government invests an additional $250 million, then $350 million the following year, and $500 million in 3 years, in base funding for basic research to the 3 research granting councils. It should do so while ensuring research funding provided through Canada's research granting councils and decisions about priorities, projects, programs, and scholarships are made using peer review process by the scientific committee on the basis of merit. We also recommend the federal government invest and reinvest significantly in its own research. The former federal government cut about $1 billion and 4,000 jobs from government science programs. This has reduced the ability of the government scientists to provide independent and reliable data at the service of the public interest. Finally, we believe that the Parliament of Canada would strongly benefit from a Parliament. His or her role would be to provide advice and analysis to Parliament about the adequacy and effectiveness of the nation's science policy priorities and funding. L'investissement dans nos infrastructures du savoir.
Investing in our knowledge infrastructure cannot happen in a vacuum. It has to be done along with improving access and participation in post-secondary education. In 1990, public grants made up to about 80% of the operating costs of universities, compared to 50% in 2014. And this is mainly due to a decrease in transfers of the federal government to the provincial governments as of 1990. The CAUT calls upon the federal government to collaborate with the provinces in order to establish and implement a post-secondary strategy in order to eliminate all barriers to post-secondary education, including financial barriers. The CAUT recommends that instead of the transfers for social programs, there be independent funding for post-secondary education, that there be a new transfer for post-secondary education that be part of a national strategy. And that should be framed by a legislation on post-secondary education based on the health legislation and Health Act. It should not depend on each government, but rather there should be national guidelines that would set stable, long-term financial funding. And in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, increasing tuition costs adds additional burdens for students, especially Indigenous students in Canada. Funds to bands should help students, could help students have access. However, the tuition costs have gone up significantly. There are still people on wait lists to obtain funding that could allow them to pursue post-secondary studies. It is time for the federal government to respect its promises to the Indigenous peoples in Canada and to recognize education as being a right under these treaties. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chitang. Turning to the Canadian Psychological Association, Ms. Cowan.
Thank you. My name is, good morning. My name is Dr. Karen Cohen. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Psychological Association. CPA is the National Association of Canada's Psychologists. The federal government has an important role to play in Canada's mental health, and we're pleased of its commitment to making high-quality mental health services more available to Canadians. If we want a healthcare system that will deliver cost and clinically effective care, then we must revision policies, programs, and funding structures through which healthcare is delivered. Mental illness affects 1 in 5 Canadians. Canadians and costs the economy $50 billion a year, yet no province currently pays for assessment or treatment by psychologists outside of publicly funded institutions. Slow down. Okay.
Translators are having a hard job to keep up.
Okay, apologies. Research has found that psychological treatments are less expensive than and at least as effective as medication for the most common mental health conditions, and in some cases work better. For depression, psychological treatments do a better job than medication in preventing relapse. Psychological treatments work, but unfortunately, only some Canadians have access to them. Access to effective health treatment should not depend on your employment benefits or income level. Those who cannot afford to pay for treatment end up on long wait lists, have to depend on prescription medications, or simply do not get help at all. We have some solutions to this problem. The CPA commissioned a report from a group of health economists that proposed several models of delivering enhanced access to psychological services for Canadians. The report provides a business case based on demonstrating positive return on investment and desired clinical outcomes. In the past decade, the United Kingdom and Australia have made huge investments in publicly funded therapy. The UK's Improving Access to Psychological Therapies program provides treatment to people with depression and anxiety disorders. The new Health Accord could improve access to psychological services by adapting similar programs here in Canada. I also want to bring your attention to an issue that is extremely important to psychologists and their patients. Budget 2013 included an unclear statement about change to the GST, about what is and is not considered a health service. Because of this change, psychologists and other healthcare providers have to charge their patients GST for some services. The new tax came into effect immediately, and the government predicts that it will collect only $1 million in 2015-16 and $2 million in 16-17. This tax policy runs counter to the government's agenda to advance mental health in Canada. Despite the fact that tax came into effect 3 years ago, it remains unclear what services should be taxed and which are exempt. Advice provided to our members from the Canada Revenue Agency have been inconsistent and contradictory. For example, we are fairly certain that an assessment to determine the impact of child sexual abuse in adult survivors for the purposes of civil litigation is now subject to tax. Also taxed are evaluations for the purposes of establishing eligibility for disability, fitness to stand trial, and mediation in a divorce proceeding. In the spring of 2015, we were told by CRA that additional clarification was coming, but none has materialized. We hope that this situation can be rectified in the upcoming budget. Investment in psychological research is also paramount to Canada's social fabric. Psychological research has broad and significant application to the well-being of Canadians and their communities, creating an understanding of people, human problems, and the many environments as which we live. And finally, as has already been mentioned, a strong science culture relies on the availability of national statistics with common data points. The cancellation of national surveys, such as the University and College Academic Staff System and the Survey of Earned Doctorates, to name just two, has left significant gaps in our ability to track the number and demographic distribution of academics in Canada, psychologists among them. Without such surveys, we don't know how many people have attained graduate degrees in psychology, who is working where, and if there are enough psychologists to meet current teaching, research, and health service needs of Canadians. In closing, I will sum our recommendations. First, make access to psychological services a priority of the new Health Accord. 2, target funding to assist the provinces and territories to improve access to psychological services. The funds could be used by the provinces and territories to adapt the UK's improved access to psychological therapies program here in Canada. 3, remove the new tax on psychological services. All psychological services have a health purpose and should remain exempt. 4, invest in psychological research, continued, increased, and balanced funding for research via base funding for the granting councils, as well as stabilized funding for operating and infrastructure support. And finally, we hope that this budget will include funding for Statistics Canada to reinstate the surveys that are critical to the development and maintenance of good programming and policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cowan. Manny, the floor is yours with the Heart and Stroke Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and honorable members. The Heart and Stroke Foundation is a national volunteer-based charity led and supported by more than 125,000 volunteers across the country and close to 2 million donors. The aim of the foundation is to create healthy lives free of heart disease and stroke, and we do this through 3 ways: the advancement of research, the promotion of healthy living, and advocacy work as well. So despite an impressive 75% reduction in the death rate from heart disease and stroke over the last 60 years, every 7 minutes, a Canadian still dies from heart disease and stroke, and that's unacceptable. It amounts to more than 66,000 deaths per year. Heart disease and stroke is the leading cause of hospitalizations and the second leading cause of death in Canada. So we have a lot more work to do. There's no doubt about it. The Foundation is proposing to work with the federal government on solutions that are consistent with the themes proposed by the Finance Minister for the 2016 pre-budget consultations, in particular creating economic growth while ensuring our most vulnerable do not get left behind. Specifically, we're seeking to partner with the federal government to do two things. One, protect Canada's children by adopting a manufacturer's levy on sugary drinks, and two, invest in science by providing $30 million annually to support heart disease and stroke research in Canada. To help protect Canadian children, we're recommending that the federal government adopt a manufacturer's levy on sugary drinks. Ideally, this tax should include various elements or best practices. It should be an excise tax based on volume, should increase according to the amount of sugar in the drinks, should be visible at the point of purchase, and include a broad range of sugary drinks, including fruit juices, which have just as much or more sugar than soda pop. A federal levy of 5 cents per 100 milliliters on sugary drinks, sugar-sweetened beverages, would raise almost $2 billion in revenue for the government, which is much-needed revenue at this point in time. Ideally, a portion of this new revenue stream would be redirected towards subsidizing healthy living initiatives, such as a national healthy lunch school program. There's strong evidence and growing evidence that sugary drink taxation is working. In Mexico, for instance, a 1 peso per ounce or 10% excise tax on sugary drink purchases led to a 12% reduction in sugar drink purchases, and as high as a 17% reduction among low-income people. This can work in Canada too, to improve health and raise much-needed revenue. So our second request deals with respect to research. There are 4 areas that are requiring investment: heart failure, creating capacity for the future, heart research for women, and nutrition. The Foundation has a tradition of working with the Canadian Institutes of Health Research and leading universities and hospitals to fund the best researchers across the country. In June 2013, the Heart and Stroke Foundation launched the Universities and Hospitals Initiative, a unique collaboration in which the HSF committed to provide $30 million annually in heart disease and stroke research funding to Canada's top 20 leading universities and hospitals. Unfortunately, despite this commitment, the reality is that Canada is falling behind in high-impact heart disease and stroke research. Applications to CIHR in all fields of research have increased by 110% between 2000 and 2010, and yet in heart disease and stroke research, it's only increased by 22%. As well, more worrisome, the number of early investigators, new researchers in the field, has been reduced by 50% between 2002 and 2010. So we need more investment to encourage young heart disease and stroke researchers. What's the opportunity here? In addition to saving lives and improving Canadians' quality of life, this investment would create high-value jobs. 70% of funds that go to research would go towards job creation. It would also help retain young researchers in the field. And finally, it would lead to as high as almost 40% return in investment. So this means that an investment in heart disease and stroke research could be fully recouped by the government within 2 years. Mr. Chair, thank you for the time. I look forward to questions and discussion with the honourable members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manny, and we'll turn to Mr. Kosh. I see that you've took the parliamentary secretary chair to the microphone. Maybe you want to do question period for him today, too.
Thank you. I haven't said a word yet, and I've been promoted already.
Lisa would like that. She'd like that. With the Hunter Wire Products Limited, Mr. Kosh, President, go ahead.
Mr. Chair and honorable members, my name is Richard Koss, and I am a small business owner from Winnipeg. You have my written submission already. I won't speak to that except to answer questions if you have any. And I know I'm on the clock, so forgive me if I get right down to business. According to recent reports, there are expectations from the Quebec government and from Bombardier that the federal government will match Quebec's contribution to Bombardier of $1 billion. That's $2 billion of taxpayers' money going to a company that has just announced a 7,000-person layoff, but strangely not in the sector that is trying to market an aircraft that itself is already $2 billion over budget. If this were a one-time event, one could be persuaded that there might be value in it. The reality is that Bombardier is constantly being fed public money and its appetite is insatiable. Between 1966 and 2009, they have received $1.14 billion already via 48 separate transactions from Industry Canada alone. De Havilland, which was acquired by Bombardier in 1992, has received an additional $1.1 billion. And Pratt & Whitney, who make the engines for Bombardier's Not Yet jet, has received $3.3 billion. My intent is not to beat up on Bombardier, but to highlight the relative unfairness of these kinds of supports when there are so many viable and productive small businesses needing help far more than the Bombardiers of the world. December 2012 StatsCan estimates placed the number of employer-owned businesses in Canada at 1.1 million, 98% of them classified as small or less than 100 employees. Other StatsCan reports state that these businesses employ over 7.7 million people, or 40% of Canada's total workforce. They contribute 28%, or over $500 billion of the country's total GDP, and account for 25% of its total exports. According to Bloomberg Business, Bombardier employs 24,000 people in Canada and contributes $12.4 billion towards our GDP. That's impressive, but should we be paying them to do that? Not all large corporations are receiving taxpayer-funded handouts, and not all small businesses are in need of financial assistance. But many are or will be in the next short time span. And I have a personal perspective to this. In September 2014, my company, Hunter Wire Products, borrowed $350,000 from BDC to purchase an automated powder painting line. We encountered numerous difficulties with the paint contractor and finally locked him out of the building in May of 2015. From that point on, we were in almost constant negotiation with BDC, attempting to obtain the release of the balance of the loan proceeds, approximately $50,000, so we could hire another firm to complete the work. We were unsuccessful. Eventually, due to other serious financial pressures added to the burden of the non-operational paint line and its loss of revenue, the company declared bankruptcy in October of 2015. This resulted in the closure of a well-known 70-year-old Winnipeg manufacturing business. For lack of $50,000, we lost a company producing over $7 million in revenue, almost $1 million of that in exports, and 50 people lost their jobs. Saving my 50 employees would have cost $1,000 per employee. In comparison, assuming Bombardier gets their requested financing, the cost is $83,333 per employee. A survey released on Wednesday by the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce cites 40% of its respondents as stating that access to financing is either somewhat or very difficult. Some of these companies are certain to go out of business due to lack of funding. You can do something about that in the upcoming budget. Make a point of creating or enhancing programs that fund small business startups. Small businesses create 3.5 times as many new jobs every year as medium and large businesses combined. That's 77% of all private sector jobs created since 2003. Ensure that there is adequate financing available to establish small businesses for their needs. This applies just as much to old wire manufacturing companies as to new 3D additive manufacturing startups, and sometimes even more so. Mandate that a certain percentage of federal government purchases must come from small business. This doesn't mean a small business front that is owned by a large corporation. Offer more loan guarantees at reasonable interest rates to allow small businesses to invest in needed technology for the sake of productivity improvement. Report after report states how underinvested Canadian companies are in R&D and technology. It's because technology is expensive and we need help. And put a moratorium on grants and subsidies and loans to large corporations, especially public traded ones. They are able to go to the marketplace for capital, Small business cannot. Honorable members, you cannot solve all of our problems. You cannot remove the risk of running a small business, and we don't want you to. We're not asking for a handout, but sometimes we need a hand up. And this is one of those sometimes. Small business is a key driver of the Canadian economy, producing the wealth that many of the other presenters here are asking you to redistribute in their direction. Help us to do that. At the very least, don't forget or take for granted where it comes from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kosh, on a very personal story as well. Before, I couldn't help thinking as you're making your case, would a little common sense from BDC have solved the problem? I couldn't help thinking when you were making your case on the problems with the need of $50,000, would a little common sense have solved the problem rather than sticking just to the complete regulatory rules?
We thought so as well. We made no headway with that. We had numerous requests that somebody from Calgary would come to our plant and see what it was we were talking about. We couldn't get that. Nobody from BDC showed up in our facility. We would have days and in some cases weeks go by with unanswered emails, and this was a vital piece of our operation. It was incredibly frustrating, and I'm not here to trash BDC. We've been a customer of BDC since 1979. We've done lots of work with them, but something has changed, it appears to us, in their philosophy and how they're operating, and they seem to be more of a bank and less of a business person's friend.
Okay, thank you. That's good information for us to have, because we do run into, or I think anybody that's an MP who's ever dealt with bureaucracy, or even a minister for that matter, Ms. Raitt, a minister trying to deal with bureaucracy, we run into that all too often. So turning to first round, 7 minutes, Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you very much, everyone, for attending today and for your being witnesses here. It's very much appreciated. I guess my first question was going to go to Mr. Ian Lee. I'd like to know, because you presented a lot of facts about some of the myths in the Canadian economy, and I'd like to get a sense of what government should be allocating resources to then that's going to get perhaps an economy growing a little bit at a higher rate, or what's going to have the greatest return for the investment?
I want to echo what Mr. Colby said. I really do think, and I've been arguing this in my research in different areas, including social policy and, for that matter, economic policy. I really think that you have to target in. It's the same idea as in business. We talk about focus, focus, focus. And the idea of universality, I think, is there's just no good argument for universality, whether we're talking CPP reform, where most people do not need help, but some people do need help. There's an example of targeting. On the infrastructure, to answer your question, and I think you will go ahead with infrastructure, and I think it's a great idea, but I think you have to do it in a very smart way and target the, and I'm drawing on Jack Mintz's excellent paper I hope all of you read, published only a couple of months ago. Infrastructure are projects that speed up the movement of goods, services, or people across distances. So let me be really blunt. That rules out green infrastructure. It rules out social housing. And it's not because I'm against social housing. I'm not. We do it in Ottawa. But if you're asking me what will give you bigger bang for buck, it's focusing on infrastructure that moves stuff. Roads, ports, railroads, pipelines, that sort of thing. You're going to get a bigger ROI, and if you want the economy to get moving again, you're going to get a much bigger ROI on so-called traditional infrastructure. So to answer your question, because I think you were asking about infrastructure, I would deal with that, leave it with that.
I'm asking about everything.
Well, targeting, number one, targeting. Because you're wasting, and you put it really bluntly, you're wasting money. I mean, if I can go back to CPP reform, just because everybody knows about it, and I've published 2 papers that are peer-reviewed on this, there's large numbers of us that don't need it. Why you would want to reform CPP to make me pay more premiums when I have a gold-plated pension at Carleton University that I think exceeds the government of Canada? So why would I want to pay more into a CPP? and which gives me less money in my pocket to spend in the economy on restaurants and spend money on small businesses. Because the premiums that you pay are taken out of the flow. Yes, they're reinvested, but I don't have them to spend. So if you do go forward with a universal reform to CPP, you're going to slow down the economy for a whole bunch of people that don't need it. So instead, what I was in that context, target the people that do need help, and there are people that do need help.
That's for people who are retiring today. But there's a lot of young people who don't have a continuous type of employment, who don't build up the pension. Like I was a university professor. I didn't get my 5 years in, so I'm not getting a pension from the last 5 years. I didn't get a pension when I was a teacher for 2 years. I didn't get a pension when I was in another employment for a couple of years. And so, it seems that, I'm 39, and so I do have 10 years of pensionable time with the military. But the rest of, that 18, 19 years, it's not there.
Right.
But the pension that I'm going to get is going to be around $8,000, $9,000.
I promise you I will send the committee my 2 papers, number one, and that I don't get royalties on this, so this isn't about money. But I'll answer it very quickly. And there's another urban legend that Canadians are completely dependent on the so-called first 2 pillars. And the first 2 pillars are OAS, GIS, and CPP. And that's simply empirically not true. Empirically, the top 3 quintiles receive very small amounts from the first 2 pillars. The bottom 2 quintiles in Canada, the bottom 40% by income, are vitally dependent on the pillars I've described, the first 2 pillars, OAS, GIS, CPP. No question about that. But the idea that the other 3 pillars are dependent on those first 2 are not. And so, I don't have the time to present the whole paper, but suffice to say that we really do have 2 different pension systems in Canada operating parallel. We don't realize it. And that's what the argument was in my paper. We have essentially social welfare for low-income elder people. It's called OAS, GIS, CPP. And people in the top 3 quintiles have all kinds of other sources of income coming in. And that's been documented in Kevin Milligan's research, in Jack Mintz's research, in Vijay Jog's research, and my research, to name just 4.
Thank you very much. And then my final question is for Mr. Koss. How much did BDC actually lose then by not investing the additional $50,000? And would it have actually saved your company? And what did your company exactly do? Because it was value added, I believe.
Mm-hmm. We were a company that started off manufacturing steel wire products, things like display stands and newspaper racks. And way back when, we made sock dryers, if you're old enough to remember what a sock dryer is. We grew into just steel fabrication. We were doing work for many agricultural companies. If you look at my written brief, we were doing work for Nortel. We were a preferred supplier for Nortel as a small company, which is amazing. We did work for John Deere and Motor Coach and New Flyer and et cetera.
Okay, turning then to...
Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
So what BDC lost, we don't know. We haven't yet seen the determination. They certainly, even in the way that they handled the dissolution of the business, it's not too strong to say reprehensible. They didn't manage it well at all. For a paint line that would have been worth $350,000, they got salvage value of $7,500. And I'm serious, $7,500 because they allowed somebody to just strip out whatever parts they could get, and they did that on the last day. Can the company come back? No, not in the same way that it was. I'm not sure that we wanted to necessarily, but it's to lose a 70-year-old family-owned business. If you look at the statistics, there are so few of them around, and this is another one that now has become a statistic, and that's just a shame.
Thank you. Turning to Ms. Raitt, 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chetang from the Canadian Association of University Teachers. Obviously, I'm from the previous government, and you gave some strong points right off the top with respect to your disappointments in how we approached innovation. I would say this, that innovation, we know from the OECD, is difficult in Canada because we lack entrepreneurship and we lack commercialization of our basic research. And that's the area that we tried to focus in on. And you view it as a narrow Canadian commercial interest, and we view it as trying to actually move from what's happening in the lab to putting it out into the real world. But that's not what my question is. My question is this. What I'm struck with by your presentation is that you are gearing it towards having more accessibility and greater enrollment in universities, bringing more people in, which is laudable, but the reality is Canada does very well in that aspect, and indeed we are number one in the OECD in terms of tertiary education. And in fact, where I'm going on this is here. Women between 18 and 34 make up 66% of this. But you know where I don't see women? I don't see them as university professors. So what are you guys doing to make sure that female university professors are making it up through the ranks from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor? And why don't you come back to this committee with a proposal on how to fix that problem that we have in our university system? So I'd appreciate that. The next time you come in, instead of worrying about what we've done in the past, think about what's happening in the future and take that as some advice to come in and talk to us about it, because I think that's a pressing issue. And I think that's exactly why we have situations of chill with respect to women in science, and we have chill with respect to women in these positions going through life, trying to figure out how to do maternity leave and still do research and still be on that track for full professorship. And I don't hear anything acknowledging that from you today, which I think is a huge pressing issue for Canadian universities. So that wasn't a question, it was my rant. So take it for what it's worth. You give me advice, I give you advice. That's the benefit of coming to a full MP panel. So thank you for listening and taking notes. Mr. Lee, if you had any other slides that you wanted to spend some more time on, I'd be willing to cede my last couple of minutes to you so you can give us some more information.
You've got quite a bit of time. Mr. Chitang, do you want to respond in any way to that? Well, the member called it a rant. We'll call it a representation.
Yes, and a couple of things. First, I would like to say that we are limited in terms of times of what we can present and make representations on. And I would be thrilled if the Finance Committee or the UMA Committee or other committees would examine about accessibility of post-secondary educations and tenure-track positions for women in Canada, as well as other equity groups. It would be our pleasure to testify and share our knowledge on this. That being said, I will echo what was said also by Mrs. Cohen about the lack of data. And the cancellations of the university and college administrative salary system is one of the sources of information that we used to know actually how many women were working in the university sector and how they were paid compared to their male counterparts. Unfortunately, that statistics has been canceled by the former government.
Look it up in a handbook. You can figure out who's a woman and who's a man and figure out
Order. Your next question, Ms. Reiki.
I asked it already, Mr. Lee. I asked if he would like to take some time on slides.
Okay, could you take a little time on science? What's the
slides?
Slides.
The slides that he had.
Okay.
It's powered down. I'll need the technician to log back on. But if I could just respond very quickly, I just want to say, by the way, we're 50-50 in the Sprott School of Business, female, male. Just want to put that on the record for Ms. Rake, because I thought very important question.
Full professors?
Sorry?
Are they 50-50 full professors?
No, this is through the rank, assistant, associate, and full,
Right.
because we've been hiring a lot of female professors in the last 5-7 years. Just while I'm getting logged on, I'll just say I will submit to the committee afterwards. I had a package of about 50 slides, all sourced from OECD or StatsCan, not manipulated by me in any way, shape, or form, because that's the way I do my research. And they were what I called urban legends, dealing with a whole series of issues that you'll be dealing with, are or will be dealing with in the Finance Committee.
Yeah.
Infrastructure spendings on science and so forth. And it's very illuminating, and I cut it down, obviously, because I only had 5 minutes, but I will submit it to the committee after today, the full suite of slides. And as I said, everyone's sourced with the full URL, so any MP can go and look at those graphs or slides and say, oh my goodness. But the one I was really wanted to emphasize again was on the diversification of the economy.
Yeah.
Whether you look at, because there's two ways of looking at it, and StatsCan does great, they produce great charts, graphs, and tables. You can look at the composition of the economy either by the number of Canadians employed in each sector or by the share of GDP. Either way, it doesn't matter. We are overwhelmingly a services economy that is highly and extraordinarily diversified. So I'm just saying, I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing more. I'm just saying that the myth, the urban legend that we're not diversified is just simply empirically false. Natural resources is a tiny, tiny share of Canada. Most of us, I've been teaching for 29 years. Every year I ask my students, how many of you are going upstream into agriculture, natural resources, or manufacturing? And in 29 years, I've had exactly 0 students raise their hands. And I have had, to my knowledge, 0 of my students go into upstream, meaning manufacturing or agriculture or natural resources. They're all going downstream. And the way I like to put it, and I'll be very quick on this, all those thousands and thousands of high-rise buildings across Canada, in Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, that's the services sector. They're not drilling for oil on the 50th floor of First Canadian Place, and they're not growing potatoes on the 30th floor of the Sun Life Insurance Building.
Are they right?
That's the services sector. So the next time an MP is saying, oh, geez, we're overwhelmingly invested in oil and gas, look around you at all the high-rise buildings in every city. That's where we all are.
But you wouldn't be saying that's not an important sector.
Oh, potatoes are very important, sir.
Potatoes, and I'm also talking energy.
Mr. Chair, I grew up on a farm.
And oil.
So that's very important.
Okay, I am told
That's good.
that we have all the slides on our iPads, but I expect this was a paperless committee last session, and likely the only one who knows how that system really works is probably Mr. Caron. We'll have to have a workshop someday on that. Okay, starting to 7 minutes, Mr. Caron.
When, Mr. Chairman, when those slides are up on the screen, I can see only the English, but I don't see the French. Will we see them? Can we have them up there bilingually or not? Both are available on the iPad, but I don't see them up on the screen. I just wanted to know. I'm sorry, it was supposed to be one language on each one.
Mr. Caron. Okay, go ahead. You have your time.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais commencer avec Monsieur Chet.
Thank you very much. I'm going to start with Mr. Chetang. Madam Wright spoke about research and development, and she said that one of the problems in terms of research and development, and I think you referred to it, and I was very impressed by an article in the Globe and Mail by Barry McKenna. He said that Canada is an importer of research and development. So we don't necessarily export research and development. Now, I don't think she's wrong in saying is that one of the problems, especially in the private sector, is the lack of entrepreneurship, for example, and the fact that our businesses are a bit too risk averse. Now, on the one hand, it's true. And you said that the government's contribution to universities and to public research has gone down over the past 10 years. But what do? Businesses aren't investing enough in research and development. The government has decreased its funding for research and development. And yet we're still trying to make our place in this area, find our place in this area. There was the Jenkins report on innovation that came out. Are there any solutions in there that should be used by the government? That's not necessarily the right direction, so perhaps you could take a couple of minutes to speak about this. Thank you. Well, that's an excellent question, and that actually is the fundamental debate. Innovation. What are the sources of innovation? What's the role of the government? What's the role of the private sector, etc.? Over the past 10 years, there were some attempts made. Public funding was put in the service of the economy. So public funding, basically in research and development, was supposed to be put to the service of, for example, commercialization, etc. And the purpose was to increase private investment. So with less public investment, there would be more private investment. And so there was this famous partnership. The university can put more money in if they find private partners. Unfortunately, over the past 10 years, there's been no increase in investment. So this formula means that there is targeted research that supposedly targets business needs or commercialization needs, did not lead to that increased investment. So it doesn't work. Now, when you look at other countries, more tax credits are provided for research and development. And that formula doesn't necessarily work either. So what should we do? And I'll just wrap up on this. I think we need to make the distinction between research and development more that is market-driven and sort of blue sky research. Over the past 10 years, a lot of money has been put into market-driven research to the detriment of blue sky research. Now, if you want to market an idea, well, you have to find it. And that idea can come from anywhere, and it can come from blue sky research. And we think that one of the basic mistakes that was made was to have withdrawn investment from that kind of blue sky research. So I think that we have to start building that capacity up again and that capacity to innovate. And in order to do so, we need to invest in blue sky research. And that's the starting point. And then other measures can be taken as well to increase our capacity in research and development in Canada. Perhaps a 10-second response to this. If you were going to look at other international example, other countries, for example, that do this well and do research and development, where do you think we should look? Well, that's an excellent question. I think we should look at countries that support public education, support access and research, and that also support private investment in blue sky research. Thank you. Mr. Koss, I really thought you had some very interesting remarks for several reasons. I'm very interested in the same issues. And from what I can see, can you hear the interpretation, by the way? Can you hear the interpretation? Thank you. I thought you had some very interesting remarks, and I've always thought that small businesses, including yours, are often victims of abuse committed by others. I won't necessarily speak about the BDC, but let's take, for example, employment insurance. I often hear people speak about this, not only in my riding, but elsewhere as well. We're going to have to avoid abuse somehow if we want to be able to open up employment insurance to business owners. For example, take maple syrup producers in my area. They can't necessarily apply for employment insurance because they own their own business, even though they only work, for example, 5 or 6 months a year. So, and you have these businesses that can't do this. And the same may apply for the transfer of family businesses. If you want to transfer a business to your children rather than to someone else, you're taxed as if it's a dividend rather than a capital gain. And this is problematic, because if you tax everything as if it were capital gains, well, there will be abuses like there were in the past. There is a bill that will be tabled. We're considering these issues, but this is the first time I've heard someone said they should not be taxed at all. Do you think that rather than taxing it as a dividend, it should be taxed as a capital gain, for example, like up to $1 million, for example, and after that a half? Or should we be completely eliminating that tax when there's a transfer of business?
Improvement, but I don't know that it's ideal. It's specifically or particularly when we're talking about family-owned businesses, the family farm, in my case, a business that's worth under $10 million. It's difficult, for instance, for my children, firstly, to come up with the money. They have to go to somebody that's willing to lend them that money, which is difficult. And so we may do an earn-in, it may be a delayed kind of thing, but if I want to give them true ownership of it, I'm deemed to have disposed of it immediately and taxed immediately, whether I've got a dollar in my pocket or not. That's problematic. And it passes a burden on to the next generation that frankly isn't fair. We've worked for however many years. I worked in Hunter Wire for 30 years. And we pay our taxes and we pay all of our employee contributions. We pay all of the other things we have to pay. And then for the benefit of that, or for the sake of that, we get to pay again so that the next generation can take it over and have the same kind of struggles. Those things tend to weaken the business, and it's no wonder that second and third generation businesses are so rare. It's so difficult to pass it on, and the burdens get passed on generation after generation after generation. If you allow those businesses, I'll say, a leg up, and we paid taxes for 30 or 40 years, and now my family can take it over without taking on those burdens again, it makes them stronger. Mm-hmm. And then we can look at growth, we can look at more employment, we can look at hiring more people, we can look at investing in more technology. We give them a boost, we give them a head start rather than penalizing them so that they're starting all over again. It's like a business game of snakes and ladders. You climb that ladder, and then you get to that point, and you go down to the bottom, and you start all over again. I understand the need for taxes, but I'm wondering if we can't, to go back to your point about targeted, let's target it. And it doesn't have to apply to everybody, but certainly to small businesses at a certain threshold. And maybe we scale that so that as a business gets larger, the tax percentage that it's payable is higher. But for a lot of small businesses that are worth a few $1 million, I think we can forego those taxes and give them an opportunity to survive long into the future. And change those statistics that are so poor of second and third generation business survival.
Thank you, Mr.
Akash.
Mr. Graywell, 7 minutes.
Thank you to all the panelists for coming today and providing your testimony. My first question will be to Manuel. I found it really interesting on your recommendation to tax the manufacturers for sugary drinks, and the percentage that you, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is based on volume and based on sugar content. And you said that it'd be estimated to be a $2 billion worth of revenue. And you said that there's a correlation of the increase in taxes to a decrease in the purchase of sugary drinks, and from other countries that have implemented this tax on sugar. Is there any studies of the impact on the manufacturing sector in terms of job losses because of this new tax? And the reason I ask is because when I used to work for a corporation that provides sugary drinks, I was a financial analyst, and I always knew that if you increase expenditures, there's going to be if you decrease revenues by increasing taxes, there will be an offset somewhere in the chain, whether it's job losses, whether it's cutting the input product, et cetera, et cetera. So is there any indication on the studies to say, okay, we're going to do this to ensure that there's less sugar being consumed by the Canadian public, but at the same time, we may suffer X number of job losses?
Yeah, very good question. So what we've known in the past is the reality is that businesses have to innovate all the time. They have to change their product lines in response to new consumer demand, et cetera, or changing business environment. So the reality of the matter is that with changing demand, consumer demand, a lot of companies right now are going to sugar-free products. So if you do apply a tax to sugary drinks, there's a great bonus in terms of health for Canadians, great revenue generation, and then what happens is those companies will innovate. They always assume costs on an annual basis to develop new products. And so simply what would happen is that their money, their investments would go into production of new products that consumers are more interested in, such as sugar-free products, diet drinks. So there is no evidence in this case that there's been any reduction or job losses as a result of a sugary drink tax across the world, whether that's in Mexico, Finland, and most recently in Berkeley, California. So and no evidence that I can tell, no.
Yeah, no, I agree with the innovation argument, and there is an uptake in diet beverages and beverages to a more health-conscious consumer. Mm-hmm. I just think your business case for implementing a tax is strengthened if there's a study done on that, and that's just my personal opinion from a financial perspective. My next question is for Mr. Lee. Thank you very much to talk about evidence-based policy. I think we all benefited from your quick yet rather informative PowerPoint presentation. I look forward to reading the slides. Quickly on the municipal revenue and spending slide, From what I read really quickly was that revenue increased by 11% and that spending has increased by...
Population increased by 11.
Yet spending increased by 43%.
Correct.
Okay, so my question was, what was the population growth over the period of time? So what was the revenue? Sorry, what's going on?
We found a problem.
Sorry, it was my fault.
Okay,
Sorry,
all
my
right.
fault.
Go ahead, we're okay now.
There we go. Perfect.
Shitang's earpiece was too close.
My apologies. So what was the revenue growth in terms of municipalities over the same time?
Sorry, what's the question again? I'm sorry.
So you said spending had increased by 43%.
Spending went up by 43% in the last 10 years, the 10-year period, whereas population growth, which is a proxy for needs,
revenue.
right?
Yeah.
So if the population grows by 11%, ceteris paribus, all other things being equal, revenues and expenditures should grow by that, or some approximate equivalent level, but it went up 4 times the population growth. So I'm not going to get hung up on the precise exact, 43, 41, whatever. My point is that the argument made by municipalities across Canada that they are desperately short of revenues isn't supported, I don't think, empirically by the evidence. I mean, let me just as a follow-up to that, just very quickly, and I mean, I obviously I say obviously to me, have a very personal interest in this because here in Ottawa, I was the one who led the fight against Lansdowne Park, which involved $300 million of public funds, us, the taxpayers of Ottawa, to build a football stadium when the mayor admitted we had $300 million of deferred, obsolete sewers, sometimes dumping raw human waste into the Ottawa River. And now I fear of giving a lot of money, unaccountable money, to municipalities is they will spend it in a profligate and irresponsible manner. Now, I had a vested interest because I was opposed to the development of Lansdowne Park because they were using $300 million of our money to build a frivolous thing, and I'm not anti-football. I'm a huge football fan. But I don't want to pay for it. I want the millionaires and the billionaires to pay for the football stadium, not me. I want our money to go on sewers or roads or ports. And so I put those numbers in there to caution you because I'm seeing some of the mayors every night on PNP saying, give us the money, no strings attached. And that really makes me extremely nervous, having gone through the experience with Lansdowne. We ended up suing the City of Ottawa. We lost. Appealed to the Court of Appeal in Toronto, lost again, and finally gave up. But only because they didn't want courts are very reluctant to overturn legislators, as you know. But my larger point is I think you should proceed very cautiously about giving a lot of money to municipalities with no strings attached. That's my underlying message.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I kind of agree with the message as well. But there's always going to be strings attached. The thing is that the government's position was that the funding formula needs to be changed because, like your other argument, there's too much regulatory burden right now on the funding transfer and on the 1/3 agreement between federal, provincial, and municipal funding. The problem I have with your empirical data on that slide is that it's too short-sighted, and I'm sure there might be more backup, and once I get a chance to review it, I'd love to touch base offline, because in my opinion, the need and the pressure on municipalities on the infrastructure spending and the infrastructure shortage across the country is actually a great deal. And I know,
I agree.
Yeah, and you said targeted infrastructure, which makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
And there was comments about, infrastructure spending that moves goods. It has a better return on investment, which I agree with. But there's also a need for affordable housing and retrofitting these homes, because there's a big percentage of the Canadian population that, needs the, access to this stuff. So, like your other slide, like 83% of Canadians don't really need CPP. Right? Well, there's still
additional CPP.
Yeah, additional CPP, right? But there's still the 17%, in my opinion, that need benefits from the Canadian government. The government will take a proactive, targeted approach to ensuring that we help all Canadians across the board. And the mandate letter said growing the economy while helping the most vulnerable Canadians succeed. And I fully agree with that. Sorry, I got to move on. I have one last question.
And go to Mr. Leipert. We're only about a minute over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lee, I can't help but spend a couple of minutes challenging you on some of your comments. And while I agree with an awful lot of what you say, I have to go back to the beginning of your presentation when you talked about the the number of people who work in the oil and gas industry or in the energy industry or natural resources.
Natural resources, yeah.
If I used your analogy of who worked in what industry, the only people who would work in the airline industry are the guys who drive the airplane. Now, when you talk about a Fifth Avenue high-rise in downtown Calgary being service sector, well, you know, the guys who actually are drilling the holes for oil wouldn't know where to drill if it weren't for the guys sitting on the Fifth Avenue the high-rise. So, you know, the facts are there that that in 2014, with 10% of the population, Alberta was responsible for 20% of the GDP. So if you're going to go out and make these kinds of statements, and as I say, I agree with an awful lot of what you say, but my view is so colored after hearing the beginning of your presentation. So I just ask you to briefly respond to that, because then I want to give Mr. Colby an opportunity to respond to what I just said, because I think he's going to agree with me and not you.
I appreciate the question. My best defense, of course, is this is StatsCan data using the input-output data that is the basis of setting up the NAICS codes. The NAICS is the North American Industrial Classification System that chops up the Canadian economy into all of the different sectors and subsectors and industries and so forth. This is not my data. This is StatsCan's data, point one. Point two, but you did ask a very, and I hope nobody gets their eyes glazed over at this word methodological, but you did raise an important methodological question. If you're in a high-rise tower in downtown Calgary working for an oil company, are you classified in the oil sector or are you classified in the services sector? My understanding, and I'm not a statistician at StatsCan, is that if you are working for an oil company with an NAICS code for oil and gas, every last one of you, even if you're a finance accountant in that company, are classified as oil and gas. Just like General Motors is in manufacturing, even though many people might be in marketing or sales where they're not on the production line, but they're still considered manufacturers. So to answer your question, to come back to you, the StatsCan data shows that 370,000 Canadians, a third of 1 million, are employed in all upstream. That's timber, that's all natural resources, molybdenum, gold mining, the whole bit. Now, I'm not suggesting that there aren't spin-offs downstream. If you want the full figure, natural resources is 12% of GDP. But remember, 80% of Canada's GDP is downstream services sector. Banks, education, healthcare, and so on.
But I come back to the point of who pays for that? It comes out of the fact that the revenue is generated. I mean, your salary is certainly not paid 100% by tuition fees at Carleton. No. It's paid by the taxpayer revenues that come from that kind of industry.
I
got a couple other questions. So I want to go to Mr. Colby briefly to ask which one of us he agrees with.
Since Mr. Liepert is a former cabinet minister in the province of Alberta, I would definitely agree with him. You know, I guess if you want to take a look at how many people's jobs are affected by oil and gas, look at the unemployment rate currently in the province of Alberta. We are sitting north of 7%. For us, from a province from two years ago, where we were sitting at 4.9%, where we had areas of unemployment, areas in the province that were sitting at an unemployment rate at 2.9%. I mean, that's your answer right there.
Right. And Mr. Easter could vouch for that.
I'm not going to take time from you, Mr. Liepert. I'll give you the time back. But I just want on that point, because I hear it all the time, the unemployment rate in Alberta. You look at our unemployment rate in Atlantic Canada has jumped as well, and it is because of what's happening in Alberta. So it just isn't the numbers in Alberta that matters. It's the numbers in the other areas where those workers come from. Mr. Liepert.
I just have a brief question to Mr. Rango. Am I pronouncing it correct? Okay. You mentioned about the sugar tax. I'd like to turn it the other way around. There's been a lot of talk over the years about us doing a lot more to encourage activity because I think I'm probably correct that as much of heart issues are caused by the wrong foods as much is caused by lack of ability to be active. What's your view on incentives, if you might, through the taxation system to have Canadians much more active?
Right. So for heart disease and stroke, it's nutrition and physical activity are both equally important. For obesity, it's a little bit more on the nutrition side because it's a little difficult. If you're overeating, it's very difficult to compensate with.
Yeah, but it's not just overweight people who have heart attacks.
Correct. No, you're absolutely correct. So both are important. So I will say here's a very important incentive to increase physical activity, and it's been actually raised indirectly here by a couple of folks. So the issue relates to shovel smart infrastructure investments. This was mentioned a little earlier on. So currently in Canada, we have a coalition that's asking for investments in active transportation infrastructure. So this means sidewalks and bike lanes, bike paths. This will help people commute to work easier by having access to public transit and rather than having to depend on cars all the time, being able to walk to the store, etc. What does this do? It reduces greenhouse gas emissions, reduces air pollution, creates jobs, and makes people healthier and therefore more productive. So I think a very important incentive is to invest in shovel-ready, shovel-smart infrastructure that can promote active living. And that's much preferable to the road to nowhere, which has no return on investment other than creating jobs. So we got to create jobs, but we also have to be smart on our infrastructure investments.
Thank you both, Francisco. And I'm going to, so that we can get 3 people in, I'm going to go to 4 minutes if we could in this last 3. Go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Chair, and thank you, panelists, for your thoughtful remarks. I'll just try to be as pointed as quick as possible. Mr. Lee, thank you for your slides. It was very insightful as an economist myself and someone who's worked in the finance and capital markets sector for 25 years. I understand where you've gotten your data and stuff. Our platform, in reference to the poverty slide, our platform is going to do more work on the poverty side, i.e., bring it down. We're going to. We've come up with the Canada Child Benefit, which will be introduced this year. It'll lift 300,000 children out of poverty. I think it's a worthy endeavor to do. I think it's great policy. The announcement on the guaranteed income supplement for single seniors, I think those are worthy endeavors on the policy side by the federal government. So I think it is a great slide to bring out. I think we need to do more work in reducing the poverty rate in Canada, and that's what we're going to do. Now my question pertains to Canadian economy in the 70s grew by about 4% real GDP. The 90s, 3%. Pre-financial crisis, about 2%. And I remember working on the bond desk when everything was imploding in the U.S. We're now growing at about 1%.
That's right.
So if you can, 3 things that we can get the economy growing quickly. And I have some follow-up, so please be quick.
Okay, I'll just shotgun them. And we do talk about this. There's a lot of economists talking about this right now. How can we move the needle? And one is restructuring. That's not austerity. Restructuring means opening up the economy, getting rid of interprovincial trade barriers, more free trade agreements, anything that encourages and fosters and facilitates economic growth, including pipelines, yes. That's one. Immigration. Younger population grows faster than older populations, whether you like it or not. And I'm sure everyone does, but that's a reality. And the third one, I do agree with infrastructure as long as it's targeted. So there's my 3.
Okay, because I think the infrastructure spend, when you're talking about infrastructure spending that gets goods and services to markets, whether it's ports, rail, etc. I think it's very important. We know the numbers. $1 investment in infrastructure provides $1.60, 64 in benefits to the economy. Right now, the Canadian economy needs it. I'm of the personal view we need the infrastructure both on the maintenance side, because there's a maintenance backlog and infrastructure deficit, but at the same time we have to take the longer view, whether it's a 4, 8, or 12-year or 20-year horizon, where we need infrastructure dollars flowing to make sure that those, call it the GTA issue, where we have gridlock and goods and services can't get to markets costing our economy billions of dollars, is important that we do something about, and that's what we're going to do. I'll end my remarks there because I think. How long do I have?
Got a minute and a little.
Okay. Mr. Manuel, Heart and Stroke Foundation. How can we get this number lower in terms of avoiding people getting to hospital with heart disease and heart attacks? It seems every morning we wake up to somebody passing away that we know that suffered a heart attack or stroke and so forth. Is it more education? Is it a lifestyle change? Is it a marketing campaign? And I know you advocate the sugar sales tax. I'm not going to touch upon that. But how do we further get the reduction down?
Okay. Like anything, and I would use the example of tobacco control, it's a multi-pronged approach that works. So yes, public awareness, public education are important. That's an important starting point. As well, we've got to make sure that the environment that we live in makes the healthy choice the easy choice. Okay, so price is important. You need to have affordable foods. And you've got to ensure that the unhealthy foods are not as affordable. The difference in the price between milk and sugary drinks, especially in northern communities, is there's a huge disparity, so we got to improve that. So affordability is important, accessibility of healthy food, accessibility of healthy living, health-promoting infrastructure, as I just mentioned. They're all important. So it's a number of things we got to do, but basically the easiest way is by changing our environment and using public policy to change our environment. Another example, and this has been raised by the government, it's a commitment, is to restrict the marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages to kids. That's another example that can improve health and improve heart disease and stroke in the long term.
As a father of a 3- and 5-year-old, I know quite well the advertising aimed at young children. I'm with you on that.
Thank you both. Mr. Abutif? 4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay. Thank you very much, actually. It's great presentations of all the panel. My question to Mr. Lee, and I'm grateful to hear a lot of positive news on the economic, in the economy at large, the economic performance and the indices that you've presented. Although I do believe that the economy is a full cycle. Everybody works for everybody, so everybody at the end of the day come up to make the economy such good or such bad. You've touched on the middle class and the poverty line reduction and the great job that previous governments have done. And, you know, I mean, for the last 10 years, we've operated to maintain or to reach at the end of the day a balanced budget. That brings me to the question is, based on the evidence that you provided, and we'll look into the details at some point, we don't, looks like we don't have to introduce a deficit budget. We probably can easily have a balanced budget. Is that the message I hear from you today?
I'm releasing a paper later today, or Monday actually, for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, making an argument along that line and putting forward, which no one has put forward thus far to my knowledge in Canada, an actual test, because I'm not against deficits, but we talk about them and say, well, we need a deficit, we got to stimulate. But nobody explains when or why or how. And so what we're doing in this short paper is arguing that deficits are essential, are necessary and useful in extreme circumstances. So we put forward a test and we give examples: the Depression, 1980-81, 2008-9, when there is a national systemic collapse or decline, dramatic decline in the economy. If the economy is growing, which it is right now, at 1.5, scheduled to go to 2, as I said last night, forgive me for quoting myself, I was on the exchange, I said, crisis, what crisis? Supertramp. Where is the crisis? There is a crisis in Alberta. I'm not trivializing Alberta and the problems of Alberta. That calls again for a targeted solution. And I have no problem with targeted solutions. GIS improvement from your government. That's a great idea. It's targeted. But to answer your question about the deficits, in this short paper, we're arguing that this does not, the current economic conditions do not meet the test. We're growing at 1.5%. Are we just going to say every time we're unhappy about the growth rate, oh, that's it, got to go into deficit and stimulate like crazy? There should be an objective, principle-based test. And so we're arguing you got to have negative GDP. It's got to be systemic across the whole country and not regional in orientation. And it must be of a very dramatic decline, not something hovering around minus 0.1, but a systemic, dramatic, sustained decline nationally. That's when you stimulate. 2008-9 was the most recent example, and today those conditions are not being met.
So I hear basically there is no time for panic. I think we should take our time and really be thoughtful over what kind of budget we need to introduce. On the other hand, I have a short question for you. Do we have a revenue problem or a spending problem?
I argue, because of the views I've developed, that governments typically face expending problems because there's always more demands than you can possibly meet. I mean, there are going to be tons of groups, hundreds of groups coming here before you at this committee saying spend, 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 or the world's going to come to an end. The end is nigh type, and you're going to have to make very tough. My joke about professors and MPs is you've got to learn the most difficult word in the English language, which is the shortest word in the English language. No, I am not changing your grade. No, I'm not giving you the money because it's not justified.
There, turning to Mr. McKinnon, the last round.
He knows the word no.
Manifestement, Monsieur Chatang, nos amis du côté.
Thank you, Mr. Chatang. I know that our friends on the other side had trouble accepting your criticisms of the previous government. I'd like to raise the issue of the long-form census. Could you tell us what the academic impact, scientific impact of the elimination of the long-form census was? Yes. Our members often told us about the impact on their own work. There were various issues being examined, whether it be the labor market, whether it be gender equality. There were various other issues that were being considered, and that examination or research was impacted. Why? Because there was a break in the data available. And unfortunately, that is irreparable. So the data is so weak now that many refuse to use it. Now, the return of that long-form census means, despite the break, means that we'll be able to continue to examine these phenomena. And we will have data then that will be able to generate more data, and our research will generate more data that will help you in making the right decisions for Canadians. So basically, the return of evidence-based decision-making. Yes, thank you.
Here today. I'm wondering if you've reflected at all, or if you have any thoughts for this committee. I think all of us, wherever you come in the country, are affected by and dislike this boom and bust cycle where, governments, whether at any level, run up big surpluses when commodity prices are high and go into deep deficits when commodity prices are low. When I think Mr. Lee would agree that, the reality is that things are probably a little smoother than they look on the surface. But from the perspective of an Albertan, do you have some thoughts on how Alberta could perhaps better prepare itself for, bust cycles in the future better than it has in the past?
Well, certainly the province of Alberta, through the Heritage Fund, through our Stability Fund that was created, was able to shelter it. When you have a material drop in commodity prices like this, it's very difficult to shelter that, and it's to some degree that dramatic drop in commodity prices is aggravated by the fact that we have no access to tidewater for our natural resources. So we're forced to take basically the price that is offered by exporting it into the United States. Certainly, I think we would have the ability to perhaps smooth that out a bit. Were we able to, in fact, access world markets?
Well, I think that's clear, and I think also government reliance on royalty income for as opposed to other sorts of revenue. Is that something that you've considered?
The government's sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
Well, I know, for example, Saskatchewan's projecting a deficit this year after, a great run-up in potash and oil prices. Obviously, Alberta is having the same sorts of difficulty, and Newfoundland and Labrador, all seemingly because of the run-on effects of an over-reliance on royalty revenue as opposed to other sources of revenue. Do you have thoughts on, on how fiscally these provinces could smooth their fiscal path?
Again, going back, we have a paper that we published about 8 years ago, calling on the provincial government to dramatically save a greater portion of the royalty of the royalty revenues that are received, put them aside, and basically take them out of the spending stream, allocated into savings before, in fact, you have folks at your door knocking on your door asking you to spend it. I guess when you take a look at it, there certainly were substantial periods of high royalty revenue, but there are also high periods of expenditures that go along with just the fact that we were into a huge boom in our economy. Former Premier Stelmach often referred to the fact that when people move to Alberta, they don't bring their hospitals and their schools. So we had a province which, in fact, had to cope with that high growth during that period. Certainly, 2020 hindsight, if it would have taken that money and basically squirreled it away, there may have, in fact, been higher taxes in the province of Alberta. Sorry.
Finish up, Mr.
I guess lessons that we learn in the past are certainly, hopefully, farm our decision-making ability in the future and improve it. The reality is, at this point in time, we have a critical issue. It's not about royalties in the province of Alberta. It's the reality that we have a low oil commodity price, which is in fact dragging down our economy. The effect on the provincial treasury is an important part of that, but certainly it's not what is in fact causing the unemployment in the province of Alberta.
Thank you both. We will have to cut it there. I have one quick question, and maybe Mr. Leipert might even have the answer in this. It's been mentioned several times by several witnesses, the discount to the price of oil in Canada as a result of not having access to Tidewater or not being able to get the product to market. How much is that discount, and what's the cost to the Canadian economy as a result? Does anybody have those figures?
Discount varies, but on average, it's in the range of 10 to 15 bucks a barrel, and
$9.60.
$9.60. So, but it has gone a lot higher, and there is a number out there, but I can't recall off the top of my head, but it's in the tens of billions of dollars.
Okay, Mr. Colby, sorry.
One of the other effects is that certainly is the differential in how we sell, the difference in the price that we sell oil and gas, but with the price that Eastern Canada pays on importing oil and natural gas, they're in fact paying more than what we're selling it for in Alberta to the United States. Ontario imports 67% of its natural gas from the United States, which is a ridiculously high amount given the fact that we have tons of the stuff in Alberta.
I wish we had more time, but we are going to have to go to the next witnesses. I thank everyone for their presentations, and it's always interesting when we have a few lively discussions when witnesses are here as well. So thank you all, and if the next witnesses could come forward. Thank you very much. Suspend for about 5 minutes. Could we come to order, members and witnesses? We're running a wee bit behind. First, to mention to witnesses that don't go too fast in your statements. The translators, interpreters are having a job keeping up because people are trying to get through their remarks in the tight 5 minutes. I recognize that. And as well, keep your earpieces away from your mics because they're picking up a lot of screeching as a result of the earpieces being too close to the mics. So with that, we'll start this round of hearings, and we will start with Information Technology Association of Canada on video conference from Toronto. Mr. Gupta, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning to everyone in Ottawa. My name is Karna Gupta. I'm the President and CEO of ITAC, Information Technology of Association of Canada. We represent the ICT sector in the country with about $160 billion in annual revenue. We invest about $4.8 billion annually on private sector R&D, which is more than any other sector in the industry. We create about 1.1 million jobs across the country, and the average salary in this sector is running over $70,000. While most other sectors are declining, we're continuing to grow, and currently we have an unemployment rate probably around 3%, which means we can't find people. So the format of the presentation I'm going to walk through today, I have sent my pre-budget submission to all of you, and you probably have it. What I'll do is I'll discuss what I'd like to see government have active engagement and investment, and the second area we'll cover is some policy areas where we believe as the ICT sector we could continue to collaborate with the government to develop the right policies. So let me start with the areas where we think the government needs to invest more. They come in three topical areas. We talked a lot about infrastructure. Digital infrastructure is absolutely critical. Second, talent. Most knowledge economy requires talent that is the ultimate resource. And finally, the intellectual property. More and more, we're dealing with trading of ideas than trading of physical goods. So let me start with digital infrastructure. On capital cost allowance, we recommend they be increased like any other sector. We recommend the CCA rates to go up to 50% of the capital investment in most areas, and 100% in those areas identified the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Economic Development as underserved in connecting the Canadian in Broadband Initiative. This change will support business case for ICT companies to provide more service to Canadians. There are direct economic benefits. These small and medium-sized enterprises will have a greater adoption of technology. It will create jobs. There's a significant amount of social benefits. It will serve telehealth, e-learning, engagement in both social and political discourse online, and particularly beneficial for remote communities, including First Nations. Second area under digital infrastructure, we also recommend the government join the provinces and private sector in investing in next generation of 5G network. Canada lags behind other industrial nations. 5G will build our capacity for innovation, commerce, and it will also serve some critical areas like Internet of Things, IoT, and cybersecurity. 5G will also allow Canadians to develop valuable IP to further our knowledge economy. Second area I'll focus on is talent. While most other sectors are shrinking their workforce and laying off people, ICT sector is growing. Currently, we have 54,000 jobs available across the country, and some recent research from ICTC declares over the next 4 years there will be 100,000 jobs that needs to be filled. Now, if we focus on how to create the Canadians to learn these skills, it'll lower not only Canada's national unemployment rate, but it would also help our unemployment in the youth sector, which is very critical. There are two specific programs I'll mention under this where government can put some funds behind. One is called Career Mash, where we promote to high schools the kids can go into the technology as choice of career. And the second is a business technology management, which in fact delivers curriculum to the universities and colleges that creates the hybrid knowledge of technology and business. Business technology management now runs across 20 universities around the country. It has enrolled 3,500 students. It is growing 25% year over year. It graduates about 1,000 students a year. And next variable is very important. The placement rate is 90%, higher than any other faculty. Now, industry has supported this program in cash and kind for over $1 million over the last several years. BTM is currently funded by the Department of Employment, Workforce Development and Labor. And it is critical that these programs be continued under the current budget for about $5 million per year for next several years, so that it could be refreshed, expanded to beyond 50 universities that's been targeted. This will ensure that the Canadians, particularly the young Canadians, can fill the existing job vacancies and join the high-paying skilled workforce for the ICT sector. Let me now move to intellectual property. This is the backbone of knowledge economy. We're not trading in physical goods, we're trading in ideas. The Canada's IP regime
I'll have to
must
get you to sum up as quickly as you can. We're considerably over.
Okay. Thank you. The Canada's IP regime is not comparable to the other OECD nations, so we need to kind of create the IP regime that is consistent with our others. One idea I would leave with this panel to think about is the government should think about lower tax rates for revenues generated from intellectual property compared to any other revenue. The last 2 points, areas where we need to engage with government, one is the SHRED tax credit. There it was reduced under the previous government. Government needs to look back and see if it was the right decision and needs to restore it. Second is stock option. There is a consideration on stock option for tech sector. This is the only way we can attract, retain, and reward the top talents. So, and finally, the Canada Health InfoWay, which is critical for digital health, I think needs to be looked at from a recapitalization point of view. So that's where I'll kind of summarize. I think things I mentioned, Mr. Chair, these actions will allow the Canadians to access the prosperity and opportunity of the digital economy, which will fuel the growth through the Canada's innovation agenda. Thank you.
Very much. Turning to, as an individual, Mr. Dussault, former Chief Actuary of Canada. Go ahead. The floor is yours, and welcome.
Merci.
Thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my remarks about an important proposal I would like to make this morning. The purpose being to alleviate poverty not only amongst seniors, but for all Canadians. Now, this plan could be undertaken by working at the pension level in Canada. 3 different parts to that. Now, according to Statistics Canada, 5% of seniors live in poverty. Now, perhaps that's not bad. It's comparable to the rest of the world. However, at least a third of seniors receive a GIS benefits. And so even if that alleviates their poverty, they live in a situation that could not be called living life with dignity. Now, the first 3 parts of my plan are this. First, I think we should do something that before 1996 was being considered. That's a senior benefits program. And under that program, we would merge the old age security and the guaranteed income supplement, so that benefits would only be paid out to those in need. So the old age security is not necessarily based on need currently. It's really provided only to those who have a minimum number of years in the country, and that is not a necessary criteria. The federal government was considering another program in 1996, and under that program, poverty could be alleviated more than the GIS does so now. So their situation would be improved, and over time, that would save about $10 billion a year. Obviously, that wouldn't start at $10 billion because this would be phased in. Now, the second part of my plan involves something that has also been discussed for a while and that will probably happen this year or next year, and that's the expansion of the Canada Pension Plan. Now, that will also alleviate poverty. And the point I want to make here is this. Under the Liberal Party's plans, expanding the CPP would exclude those earning under $30,000. And that is based on the fact or the assumption that those people don't necessarily need it because the GIS does that work as of 65 years. However, one has to recall that those who are earning under $30,000 from year to year are not necessarily going to be the same people from year to year. So I don't think it's a good way to proceed, that is to exclude people based on those earnings, minimum earnings. Second, the GIS is a bit of a Robin Hood approach, and I don't think that one should be used. Obviously, we will have to use it to a certain extent, but we should use it as little as possible. We should use a different approach that makes savings mandatory. If you don't make retirement savings mandatory, they don't necessarily do it. And expanding the CPP rather, would reduce the number of people receiving the GIS, so that could go from perhaps 35% to 25%. Now, for those who earn under $30,000, they don't have much of a margin in order to be able to put money aside and contribute to the CPP. But that's a problem caused by the fact that poverty amongst workers is mainly caused by too low a minimum wage. It's at $10 right now. I understand that there are employers who pay more than that, but only $10 an hour, regardless of the type of employee, does not allow you to live with dignity. Third, private retirement plans. So there are defined benefit plans, and there are financial problems with that are mainly caused by the fact that contribution holidays are allowed. So that means that surpluses can be withdrawn from the plans and used for other purposes, and that's a recipe for financial disaster. So there's a big problem with these kinds of plans, that these kinds of holidays should be prevented, and the surpluses should be amortized, as is done with deficits, by reducing or increasing contributions. My third point is this: the age of eligibility.
We are on time.
Oui, c'est ça. Il faudrait que l'âge d'admissibilité, au lieu d'être...
The age of eligibility, rather than just being changed drastically at one point in time, should actually be based on the year of birth. For people who are born recently, they will be, of course, living longer. And so the age should be based on the year of birth. So let's take 65, those who are born in 1950, and it should be increased accordingly. Thank you very much.
Just to say to committee members that you have a presentation as well that members will be receiving. Turning to the Association of Canadian Port Authorities, Ms. Zatelny, I think I got it close.
Thank you for that.
Go
Yes.
ahead, Wendy.
Much better. Thanks, Mr. Chair. And good morning, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. As you can tell by our name, the Association of Canadian Port Authorities represents the 18 port authorities across Canada that make up the national port system. And we're grateful for the opportunity today to provide our input to this committee as you continue your pre-budget consultations. In our pre-budget submission, which you have received, we specifically request that the government work with Canada's port authorities to remove the barriers existing to financial flexibility, to help us improve and continue to improve our port infrastructure, and to maintain the existing high level of port security. And we believe that these investments will see Canada become one of the World Bank's top 10 countries in the world for transportation logistics and supply chain efficiency. And in short, we have an opportunity before us that we believe we can leverage through some additional investments. But first, let me give you a little bit of context. Reality is, with more than 90% of everything that we buy traveling by ship at some point, maritime trade underpins the global economy. And Canada's world-class port authorities are very much at the heart of this economic opportunity. Our port authorities handle nearly 2/3 of Canada's waterborne cargo and are pivotal in driving our country's economic growth. In fact, Canada's port authorities in total handle over $400 billion worth of goods every year, trading with over 160 countries. This contributes to Canada's economic growth, and we create over 250,000 direct and indirect jobs that pay higher than average wages. So ports are powerful drivers of job creation and economic growth in every region of the country, and we're very proud of the partnerships that we've built in the private and public sectors, as well as the commitment that we have made to the communities that we operate in. But the shipping world really is changing dramatically. Expanded trade is making our world smaller, and traditional trade patterns are shifting. So remaining competitive in a rapidly changing world will require us to strengthen our port facilities and continue to find ways to improve our supply chain efficiencies. How do we do that? Well, first, we propose removing barriers to give ports much-needed financial flexibility. This will allow our ports to react nimbly in a highly dynamic and a very competitive environment. Amending the Competition Act would allow port authorities to collaborate with an eye toward maximizing asset utilization to help ease the burden of uneven pressure and demands that are exerted on ports by shifting global trade patterns. As well, current caps on borrowing limits, which are set much lower than what port development projects actually require, as well as a long and opaque process to obtain supplementary letters patent amendments, also present challenges for ports. As I said, ports are and will continue to be powerful trade enablers for Canada, but to do this effectively, we really do need the flexibility to adapt to rapidly changing commercial market forces. Second, financial support of strategic port infrastructure is needed to maximize Canada's economic output. It takes a wide range of partners to support such infrastructure projects, and the federal government really is a crucial element of that patchwork quilt of financing. A 2012 ACPA Transport Canada study showed that there was a capital investment need of $5.8 billion just to cover the development projects of the ports. This is not $5.8 requested from the federal government, but simply the sum total of the port development projects. Within that, 1/3 of that, so $1.9 billion, was needed simply for the rehabilitation of existing port assets as opposed to developmental projects. These relate primarily to wharf substructures, berth face structures. But the challenge for ports is finding the financing for these necessary rehabilitative projects as opposed to development or growth projects for which it's easier to find financing partners. The reality, though, is that these rehabilitative projects are shovel-ready now, and ultimately an investment in port infrastructure will have a multiplier effect. An initial injection will go into supporting not only the local economy through the initial construction and work, but there's a second bounce that comes from the ability of the port to grow its cargo. There's a very compelling OECD study that has shown that every additional ton, or 1 million tons of new cargo going through a port can lead up to the creation of up to 300 new jobs in the port hinterland. So truly, it's a win-win scenario. Lastly, we believe that as Canada continues to negotiate its free trade agreements with countries around the world, ports will be called upon to manage an ever-growing amount of cargo and passengers. And it's essential that ports continue to be able to maintain a very high level of security. As technology evolves, We need to stay ahead of the curve to make sure that security stays optimal so we can continue to ensure the safety of Canada's economy within what is a constantly evolving threat environment. So to do that, we are requesting the establishment of a suitable funding program, essentially a return to an existing security funding program that had existed, to support port security regime, including adapting to emerging threats such as cybersecurity challenges. So as Canada's trade agenda continues to pick up steam, it's crucial we take the necessary steps to ascend that ladder and improve the position as a leading trading nation. We believe we really do have the opportunity as a country to break into the World Bank's top 10 of trading nations in terms of supply chain efficiency. We're confident we can improve our position with the Government of Canada on board. So I'll end with that, Mr. Chair, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, Ms. Sito.
Merci de m'avoir invité aujourd'hui au nom de l'association.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak today on behalf of the CAFTA, the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance.
Organizations that seek a more open and fair international trading environment for agriculture and agri-food. Our members represent farmers, processors, exporters from the major trade-dependent sectors, including beef, pork, grains, oilseeds, sugar, pulse, soy, and malt. Together, we account for 80% of Canada's agriculture and agri-food exports, about $50 billion in exports, and an economic activity that supports hundreds of thousands of jobs across the country. What I'd like to imprint on the committee today is the importance of competitive access to global markets for export-oriented sector. As you know, the Canadian agriculture sector depends on trade for the large part. Over half of everything we produce is exported. That's 50% of our beef, 70% of our pork, 75% of our wheat, 90% of our canola, and 40% of our processed food products. So for us, being competitive in international markets is not a choice, it's a requirement. In the current environment of trade liberalization, the competitiveness of our sector depends on the timely negotiation and implementation of trade access to the markets that our competitors are also after. What we've lived through with Korea cannot happen again. With basically $1 billion markets that was cut in half virtually overnight when our competitors, namely the US and Australia, had access and tariffs eliminated when we did not. So it is critical that Canada ratifies the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement quickly. CAFTA strongly supports the TPP and believe it is integral to the future viability of our export-based agriculture sector. The TPP region absorbs 65% of our exports. It includes some of our largest traditional markets, the US, Mexico, Japan, but also some of our largest competitors, the US, Mexico, and Australia. And some of these countries already do have free trade agreements with one another. So the more TPP drags, the more we fall behind. Ultimately, if we're not part of the TPP, Canada will fall behind. We also strongly encourage the completion of the respective legal and political processes related to the Canada-Europe Free Trade Agreement, the CETA, while simultaneously completing technical discussions so that the stated benefits of the agreement can be realized in the form of commercially viable access for all exporters. CAFTA has strongly supported the CETA agreement as it's expected to result in significant benefits for our exporters, this assuming that negotiated outcomes will provide commercially viable access for our members. Outstanding technical issues to allow real access to the EU remain, and we are confident that the Canadian government is working hard to resolve these issues before the CETA is implemented. Our support for the implementation of the CETA will be based upon the extent to which the negotiated outcomes will result in commercially viable market access for Canadian agriculture and agri-food exporters. Our recommendations for the Government of Canada to contribute to a globally competitive agriculture and agri-food sector in Canada are: the Government of Canada should allocate proper resources to the functions in charge of negotiating free trade agreements. That's specifically the team of negotiators working on the TPP, the CETA, the WTO, and the next generation of future agreements for Canada. The Government of Canada should allocate proper resources to the functions in charge of implementing free trade agreements and maintaining and restoring market access. Typically, once free trade agreements are implemented, we see multiple non-tariff barriers arise. It's essential that adequate funding be allocated to the Market Access Secretariat MAS, so it can continue its critical work of minimizing technical barriers to trade and restoring real access for exporters. It must be noted that MAS depends on the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA, to deliver the technical support, so proper CFIA resources would be a component of that here. The Government of Canada should allocate proper resources to the network of Canadian representatives abroad. That's particularly the embassies and agriculture trade commissioners. Canada's ability to build a competitive industry depends in large part on how well the country will open doors abroad and leverage relationships with relevant government and industry influencers. The Government of Canada should also continue to support relevant ministers and senior level officials in their activities to build and cultivate relationship at a high level in foreign markets. This is critical to enhance trade and market development efforts for Canadian exporters, and this particularly in Asian countries. And in closing, our sector encourages financial policies that expand our ability to competitively market our products to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sato. C.D. Howe, now from the C.D. Howe Institute, Mr. Lauren, floor is yours.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having invited me today.
Mission once it's translated, so I will go very quickly, just highlight the main recommendations. And I'll boil it down, and a lot of the concepts are in the submission or in other literature, so you're always invited to read what I wrote on these topics. First of all, let me talk about the personal income tax system. You'll all agree that reforms should be conducive to economic growth, especially in this tough environment. So here we have a good news and a bad news stories. The good news is that the reform of the federal child benefits that was promised in the new government election platform will actually do something good for the economy, good for work incentives, because the money reinvested from the UCCB and the family tax cut will serve to lower the clawback rates or the benefit reduction rates that are reduced with income. So the clawback rates will be reduced significantly, and those clawback rates act like hidden tax rates. And when you sum all contributions, all tax, and those hidden tax rates, which are benefit clawback rates, when you sum them up at the very low end, at between $25,000 to $45,000 family incomes, the effective tax rates can be as high as 70% for some families. So this is really high. It hinders work incentives, and the reform as proposed in the election platform mentions reduction in clawback rates in the range of 5 to 17%. This is significant, and it would have a positive impact on work incentives, so a positive impact on the economy. So it would be important to see that the reform effectively do reduce clawback rates and not only make the system more generous. So that's the good news. The bad news is that overtaxing top incomes is economically inefficient. I have written a lot about this. Tax rate hikes at the top when the rates are already approaching 50% are economically damaging. Using a measure of behavioral response that is consistent with the economic literature, I estimated that the 4 percentage points increase in the top tax rate would yield about $1 billion in new federal revenues, but will cost provincial governments $1.4 billion. So there's a net loss, consolidated government net loss of $400 million. That means that we have reached the top. We cannot go higher. Like we're pretty much at the point where we extract as much as we can from top earners. It also means that, ironically, reducing the top tax rate or reversing even the latest increase would be a cost-effective way to provide stimulus, fiscal stimulus at this point in time. I know it's ironic, but it would be a cost-effective tax reform. Now that we're talking about deficit, there's definitely a need for the government to tightly manage its internal operation costs. You'll agree with me that when times are difficult, you need to manage your own house very effectively. And one of the things that we kept repeating in the CDAO Institute for many years is that the total compensation package for federal employees result in compensation per hour, so average compensation per hour, much higher than what is found in the private sector. For federal government services job, the average compensation per hour is $64. That's Statistics Canada that says that. And for professional scientific and technical services job, it's $40 per hour. In finance and insurance industry, it's $45 per hour. So there's a significant difference, but that difference is not attributable to wages and salaries. It's mostly attributable to the cost of pensions and the cost of other future benefits. And that's the important thing here. Those costs represent about 43% of wage and salaries for federal employees. It's very high. And if there is something to do, it's to work on this aspect of the compensation package. So Ottawa should continue its reform of the sick leave management system, the reforms that are currently underway. So they should continue because they lead to major savings. And also pension plan contributions as an employer should be capped at 50% of what is available for people saving in RRSPs and people in DC pension plan, which is 9% of pensionable earnings, along with the move to a shared governance, employee-employer governance, as is found elsewhere in the public sector. Finally, let me talk a little bit about the infrastructure spending, because there's lots of talk about it. Infrastructure spending is good. It would provide economic benefits that are greater than the cost of the investment. It can improve productivity in the long term. That's a good thing. It can also increase demand in the short term, so it's a good stimulus. But the scope for such action is limited if the investment are in big capital investment projects in partnership with provinces and municipalities when these projects are not shovel ready. So we need to be careful of that. We need to focus on federal infrastructure when we know that the implementation times will be quick, and that's when we will get the bigger bang for our bucks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Laurent. Turning to the mayor of the city of Barrie, on behalf of the large urban mayors of Caucus of Ontario, Mr. Lehman. Floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of committee. That's a nice segue from Mr. Laurent's testimony on infrastructure. I wanted to recognize and thank MP John Broussard for being here, the member for Barrie and Innisfil today as well. And thank you for allowing me to speak to you on behalf of Ontario's big city mayors. We are the mayors of the cities in Ontario with 100,000 or more population, which represents two-thirds of Ontario's population. As you all know, our cities in Canada are being asked to and called upon to meet new challenges, and I think the issues that affect us as mayors are the issues that affect everyday Canadians: affordable housing, jobs, and infrastructure, and I will say a little bit about each today. I wanted to start by saying that it's very encouraging to see the federal government's focus on ensuring prosperous and secure communities. Investing in our cities strengthens our economy and ensures our long-term prosperity. Municipal finance is very complex, but the major fiscal challenge affecting us, Ontario's big cities, is straightforward. We're spending less than half what is needed on existing infrastructure, which has led to an infrastructure deficit. With the renewed federal partnership, Ontario cities are ready to get shovels in the ground quickly on major infrastructure renewal. Mr. Laurent and I did not coordinate our testimony. That just happened. The list of projects are long, and the urgent need for reinvestment in existing road and water networks, building new transportation links, and community infrastructure cannot be overstated. As Ontario's big city mayors, we're very encouraged by the Liberal Party's platform of infrastructure investment, which we believe is based on collaboration with municipalities and vows to address the critical issues facing our communities, such as affordable housing. However, what cities need is long-term, predictable, sustainable, and dedicated infrastructure funding mechanisms, similar to the permanent and indexed gas tax fund. We also need streamlined and faster approval processes and greater coordination and consistency between federal and provincial infrastructure funding programs. We do not need a process of political-based decision-making, nor do we need to create application processes and agreements that are so lengthy and complex that we lose the 2016 construction season. And I wanted to say to the committee, I also believe that it is really time we stop treating our basic economic infrastructure in this country like it's something to only be invested in or maintained during periodic stimulus periods. The productivity gap, which is holding Canada's economy back, is partly as a result of our underinvestment in the fundamentals of a strong modern economy, chief among them the ability to move goods, people, and information at the speeds demanded by modern businesses. And a permanent increase in gas tax funding with criteria that tie this investment to economic infrastructure would allow all three levels of government to engage in building our economy and making Canada more competitive. Now, in addition to urgently needed investments in infrastructure, Ontario's big city mayors believe that although all levels of government are working to create jobs and grow the economy, too often this is still done in isolation. We're in need of a diverse and robust job strategy for Ontario and Canada, with clear actions to address labour market reform through skills training, apprenticeship reforms, and immigration reform, expansion of international trade and foreign direct investment through a new coordinated trade agenda shared by federal, provincial, and municipal governments. And while we need to invest in the roads and pipes that keep our cities working, we also need to consider the basic needs of the people who live there. Affordable housing is a critical issue affecting cities across Canada. With housing markets on overdrive, many Canadians are priced out of our major cities, and indeed many of our smaller ones. Worse, low-income Canadians cannot find housing at all and face long wait times for social housing. Rents in Barrie, for example, are the 7th highest in Canada. Our wait list for social housing is more than 1,500 households long in a city of 55,000 households. And low-income seniors face a wait of up to 5 years for a unit. This is not acceptable in a modern Canadian city. Municipalities are ready to work with our provincial and federal partners to solve the housing crisis. According to FCM, public investments in housing are one of the best ways to grow our economy. For every dollar invested in housing, Canada earns $1.40 in GDP. In collaboration with FCM, we're calling for a comprehensive national housing strategy that provides for greater policy coordination, collaboration, and the necessary resources for actions and results. In addition, there are innovative approaches to affordable home ownership that can be explored through federal tax policy, supporting lower-income families, giving them pride of ownership and building equity. Some examples include down payment assistance grants, renovation cost credits for adding secondary suites to existing housing, and removing the GST on certain housing-related costs such as construction materials for affordable housing. But it is only through a meaningful investment in capital projects in the affordable housing sector that we can address this crisis. In closing, the Ontario big city mayors face the same issues that face Canadians across the country. To move forward, we believe we must put investment in infrastructure at the heart of our national economic strategy. Overcoming Canada's biggest challenges requires close collaboration between all levels of government. Ontario's big cities look forward to a true collaboration and partnership with the newly elected government in working together to move forward with this shared agenda. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lehman. We'll go to our first round of questions, and we're going to try and hold everybody to 5 minutes. That way we can get everybody on. That would be 8 questions at 5. Stephen.
Okay. Merci. Thank you, everyone. Great variety of submissions and, as usual, a very high quality. My first question is to Mr. Gupta. We've heard a number of interventions about capital cost allowance and connecting rural communities, allowing more Canadians access to broadband and high-speed internet and other things. I'd just like you to expand, if you would, on your capital cost allowance recommendation and perhaps discuss a little bit about how what barriers there may be in the private sector on the telcos, for example, to getting something like that implemented.
Thank you for the question. I think there's several measures to encourage the use of technology, such as the 2006 Telecommunication Policies Review Panel. They particularly identified the ICT adoption around a lot of the tax credits that are tied to CCA rate. And it directly helped the adoption of, conclusion would help the adoption of technology, particularly around the small and medium-sized businesses. So what we asking the government to do is look at across the board the CCA rates that are out there, and for the several classes of depreciable assets that relates to the communication network equipment, including the broadband networks. And the recommendation we have is to increase them from the current rate base to 50% for capital investments. And it's not only telcos. You got cable cos, you got the satellite providers. The communication is multidimensional now. And also look at 100% in the areas that are particularly identified by the industry of innovation, the old Industry Canada, as underserved in connecting the Canadians for broadband initiative. And these will, we believe, will definitely change the arc, the way we connect the communities and serve these communities for health, education, and even job creation. Particularly in the ICT sector, what you find is in other sectors, people go to jobs. In technology, jobs will go to people. So we want to make sure that the people are connected to the the new network, the broadband network, so can do the work, the innovation, and contribute to the communities directly as required.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
I'd like now to turn to the port authorities. I was quite interested in what you had to say, and I think Mr. Laurent also pointed out how important it is to invest in our port infrastructure. The Port of Vancouver has announced very good results. And obviously, we've been talking about the Pacific Gateway. We're having this same conversation in Montreal regarding the Port of Montreal. Could you perhaps expand a little on the importance of investing in our port infrastructures and how that links up with our capacity to export? And while I have the floor, perhaps Ms. Citeau, you could also comment on that. And with your permission, I'll respond in English.
The reality is, as I said earlier, ports are very much economic generators. We are facilitators of trade and economic activity in two ways, both through the cargo that we move, but also as the port authorities have evolved their business models, they also have become export developers in their own right, where they will go abroad, bring local businesses with them, and help develop export markets abroad, as well as bringing cargo into Canada. So by virtue of playing that facilitator role, the port therefore contributes back not only into its community, but the broader economy. However, in order to be able to do that, the ports do require the capacity to grow. And we represent a very wide range of ports, a lot of them within city limits. They need space to grow. They need to be able to have the flexibility to trade land parcels so that it works best for the municipality, the people living there, as well as for the port, as well as they need to be able to invest in information technology that will allow them to simply manage the movement of goods more efficiently. So when it comes back to investments in infrastructure, the importance of that by being part of the funding blend for ports, it simply becomes an additional enabler for ports to grow. We talk about P3s. Ports typically invest in what I call P6s, right? Their funding model is a combination of federal, provincial, municipal funding, private sector resources borrowed. It's a patchwork. Federal funding is an important part of that. It's a catalyst.
There and come up to you on another question, Ms. Citeau. Mr. Leipert.
Thank you very much. Mr. Loran, I'd like to explore a little bit more your comments relative to the highest, or I guess the highest taxable income earners in this country, because certainly I'm an Alberta Member of Parliament, and we just had a situation where on January 1 we went from 10% flat tax to a progressive tax, where our the so-called rich that we always hear about, or that higher income tax bracket, is actually not that high when you hit that level at a relatively low taxable income. How do we compare at that level if you combine both federal and provincial to our American tax system?
You're absolutely right that the income threshold in the U.S. is the highest tax rate comes at a higher income threshold than in Canada. So for our high income tax rates, their tax burden would be lower in the States. That would be that's what matters, really.
What impact does that have on the brain drain from our country?
Well, it's the highest, the tax rate on talent. The higher the incentives for talent to move where it's most financially advantageous. I know it sounds obvious, but it's the truth. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to move away. It's not at all what happens. But you just need a few to make a dent in your expected tax revenues from the hike, and that's enough to lower the tax base, and that's enough to create sometimes a shortfall, or sometimes tax revenues that are negligible compared to what it would have been without a behavioral response.
Ms. Stowe, one of the things that, as an elected official, if asked a question by the media when it's prefaced with "if," I refuse to answer because it's hypothetical. But I'm going to put my reporter's hat on and ask you a question that starts with "if." What if the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is not ratified? What are the impacts on our agricultural community in the next 5 years?
I think, as I said, if the TPP goes ahead and be ratified and Canada is not part of it, we will fall behind. What specifically the numbers, what will look like, that is, I think, difficult to determine at this point. But if you look at, as I mentioned, what happened with Korea, the fact that in 2011, this was our top fifth export market for Canadian agriculture, $1 billion market for agriculture, and literally overnight our exports were slashed in half, and that direct loss was directly attributed to the fact that our competitors, the U.S. and Australia, had signed and implemented agreements with that particular market. Now the Korea-Canada agreement was implemented January 1st, and we've been able to slowly regain market access, but it will continue to take time. But who knows what will happen? But we know exactly if the TPP is ratified and Canada is not part of it. But we know that the impacts will be devastating for our sectors, for farmers who depend on trade, and that's 90% of them in Canada. The impacts will be very negative and very devastating.
Do I have more time?
Yeah, were you going to share a little time with Mr. Broussard?
I'm happy to. Yep.
Mr. Broussard.
Thank you, Oleg, and thank you, Chair, for the opportunity.
Question to Mayor Lehman. You spoke about the gas tax fund, the potential of faster streamlining, making sure that it's not politically based. You also mentioned about the importance of the construction season. Most municipalities, as I understand it, have finished their budget process now. I'm just wondering if you can expand a little bit more on the comments you made and what LUMCO would like to see with respect to some of the points that you brought up.
Thanks for that, MP Broussard. The construction season for us, we're tendering now, literally as we speak. I think in earnest, tendering will begin in the next couple of months. Toronto just passed its budget or initial vote on the budget yesterday. I think the loss of the construction season really pushes you back by a full year. The easy way to do this is to simply have a very, very straightforward formula, something which is per capita, that allows the funding to flow. If there are criteria that wish to be put on the investment to ensure that I keep hearing the terms shovel smart, are the types of investments that are most beneficial to the economy in terms of transportation investments, in terms of other infrastructure investments. I agree with Mr. Gupta, broadband is an excellent investment. Then I think that's fine. I think you will find that Ontario's cities and cities indeed across the country have long lists and would welcome any assistance. What I think is very, very important, though, just the agreement process. This may sound like a little detail, members of the committee, but just the agreement process itself often takes a long, long time and can keep the actual economic impacts, moving the needle, it can take a lot longer. So it's not just that the application process is straightforward. It's that the agreement process is straightforward, because we can't move ahead with something that's truly incremental, if this is to be an incremental investment in Canada's infrastructure, until there is an agreement in place. So I really want to emphasize that point, MP Broussard, not only the application and the allocation process be non-political and straightforward, but the agreement process be straightforward as well. That's why we favor the gas tax, because it's an existing mechanism that you could simply amplify.
Thank you very much, both. Mr. Caron.
Monsieur Laurent.
To Mr. Laurent, I'd like to pick up where Mr. Liepert left off with respect to that higher tax rate for those earning over $200,000. Now, what you're saying is theoretical. Now, empirically, though, have we seen this in the past? In the recent past, in terms of what taxing that higher bracket does and the brain drain? Well, in terms of the reaction of taxpayers to being taxed, there are many empirical studies actually that have been undertaken. In my own study on the topic, I collected about 11 or 12 serious studies on the topic, empirical studies, and they were using two methods, two top-of-the-line methods. And I was using excellent data from excellent data banks. They're very good studies. So in terms of a reaction to taxpayers, yes, we know what their reaction is. And one can use the results of these studies in order to estimate what will happen quite precisely. So with respect to those studies, those 11 or 12 studies, were they North American studies, European? Where were they from? Well, began with in the United States. The Department of Finance here did a study. There have been others in Canada, academic studies. And UK studies. So from an empirical standpoint, then, is it not more probable that higher tax rate on a higher bracket be compensated, rather than moving to another jurisdiction, be compensated by, say, change of behavior? For example, a different kind of use of tax shelters, for example, and the use of tax experts. And that change in behavior has it then resulted in any lower income, for example? Well, yes, there is a partly a behavioral change. There is financial planning, yes, that takes place. And there's another aspect as well, though, that I think is important. There are economic reactions that occur. People may work less. They may take less risk. They may invest less in the future, for example. So people take less risks. So there are economic real reactions. So there's a whole mix. So when you're talking about a brain drain then, that's not necessarily what will happen. There are many things that could happen, including spending more time perhaps with one's children, on recreational activities, perhaps changes in one's behavior that makes sure one pays less taxes, for example, and that one doesn't, for example, move into that higher tax bracket, for example. Yes, there are all kinds of possible changes and reactions. Mr. Dussault, how much time do I have left, Mr. Chairman? 1 minute? I don't have much time then, but we have heard of a potential increase in contributions to the CPC, the CPP rather. But what we hear is that could harm small businesses. We don't have the means to do this. So this study has been considered for a long time. And during the last federal provincial finance ministers meeting, it was raised again. There was 1 year of study again that was being considered before making any changes. What would you say? Well, it is a justified fear, but that doesn't necessarily happen that way. When the CPP and the QPP were established in '66, and when contributions went from 3.6 to 9.9% in 1987 and 1989, it was difficult for small businesses, but they were able to absorb those additional costs. So I don't see why a minimal expansion that would cost 3 or 4% of the salary, so 2% for employee, would be a major barrier. That could be absorbed, and ultimately it is the employees who absorb that. There may be a reduction in salary increases. However, I don't think that's a major impediment.
Mr. Sabero.
Thank you for your presentations, everyone. I could ask a question for everyone, but I'll just try to limit it to 3. For Wendy, I don't mispronounce your last name. Having grown up in the town of Prince Rupert, British Columbia, I know how important the ports are, and important Prince Rupert, and what its growth has done, and what it's done for that town after the devastation from pulp mill closures and the downsizing of the fishery. In terms of what's most important to keep our ports competitive versus Long Beach versus Newark, New Jersey, what are the top 2?
That's almost like being asked which of my children are my favorites.
You got to pick sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult. What I would say is twofold. One is ensuring that the port authorities themselves have the financial and regulatory flexibilities to be able to respond very quickly within changing market conditions. You mentioned the competitor ports in the U.S. West Coast. Ships travel, and shippers will seek the most effective, fastest, and cheapest route to get cargo to destination. So for the port authorities to be able to respond to this and ensure that level of competitiveness, both through, as I said, the financial flexibilities that allow them to purchase land, expand, or change as required, is extremely important. A part of this is, as we've noted in our submission, being able to amend their letters patent quickly to manage land transfers, that sort of thing, as well as borrowing limits. That's the first part of it. The second part of it is, again, for the level, being able to have as much access to the various levels of funding as possible. I mentioned P6s. It's infrastructure funding. Federal infrastructure support is extremely critical to that.
Thank you. For Ms. Sito, if I pronounced that correctly, obviously, Canada is a trading nation, and we depend on it, and we prosper from it. Is the sector the agri-food sector ready in terms of its labor force? We've heard all week with reference to temporary foreign worker issues, the review that our government's going to undertake because of the changes that were made that seem to have wrecked the system or impeded what the system was supposed to be. So my concern, I've heard this from, say, the Cattlemen's Association and the Beef Farmers Association, is that we may not actually have the labor force in place in the scenario where TPP is ratified and the European trade agreement is completed, that we can take advantage of the opportunities that present themselves with this trade deal. Can you talk about the labor aspect, please?
I think whether labor or things like infrastructure, to some extent, these can be considered as barriers for our sector and their ability to get products to market, for example. But this is something that is handled by our members directly, the meat sector in particular, and not a CAFTA mandate at this point.
Okay, thank you. And for Bernard, your comments on OAS and GIS, we sometimes forget that those are funded from government revenues, where CPP contributions are funded from workers. GIS and OAS were put in place to help the neediest of the neediest. So where would you see any chance of reform for old age security in terms of, A, with the goal of incentivizing older workers to stay in the labor force, and B, providing more resources for those seniors that need it?
Well, as I said in my presentation, and I have tabled a brief to that effect, the OAS is paying money on the basis of residence test rather than need. So the goal of OAS and GIS should be mainly to address poverty needs, and whatever change we made to those programs, I don't see they could achieve what you are suggesting, incentive for people to stay to work. Those incentives, they come naturally either because people are in need and they work longer, and the other factor, which is taking more and more room, is the fact that people live longer and in better health. So they are induced to work more because some people, a lot of them, enjoy working. So they enjoy it and make more money. So.
Okay. Thank you. How long am I?
Very quick one.
Well, from Mr. Lehman from Barrie there, just down the street in Vaughan, the gas tax. Simple, straightforward mechanism that everyone enjoys. I know the city of Vaughan receives about $8 million a year from the gas tax. Are you calling for an expansion in the gas tax in your comments?
We believe that the funding allocation within the gas tax. If you're asking, do we think you should raise the gas tax?
No. I'm asking the.
Are you asking whether the
5 cents out
allocation
of
to
the 10
municipalities
cents.
should be larger? Yes, that's what we're suggesting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for Monsieur Laurent and Monsieur Dussault, if you could give me your point of view very quickly on guaranteed annual incomes, and because there's been a lot of talk in the newspaper these days about looking at that, and perhaps Mr. Dussault, if we start with you, and then I'll go to Mr. Laurent on the topic.
The Guaranteed Income Supplement program is very well designed, and any country need a program like that to alleviate poverty among seniors. The program is doing a very good job, though the level of support might be increased a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Monsieur Laurent? I'm talking, and I'm talking about the basic income for everybody.
Guaranteed annual income, it's been studied for many years. The biggest problem is its cost. It's extremely expensive. It's very difficult to implement. We've looked at numbers in the past, and it was you eliminate everything. Like you eliminate welfare, you eliminate even the EI and any type of income support, and then you have only one payment through the fiscal system, the guaranteed annual income. It doesn't work. like the maths never really worked because it ends up being more expensive if you want to make a difference, because you cannot eliminate poverty. You cannot have a guaranteed annual income that is high enough to put all these people out of poverty. And of course, you have to watch the clawback rates. You don't want a clawback rate that is too steep, because then it would have a huge impact on incentives to work. So it's a real puzzle. It's not an easy solution, and I haven't seen a credible study yet that would show that it could work here in Canada.
Thank you. Ms. Zatilny, of course I'm going to ask a port question. Everybody thinks of the big guys, Vancouver, Montreal, Halifax. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the smaller ports that are equally important to the fabric of moving goods in our country?
Well, thanks for the question. There are, the association breaks down really into two major groups. The smaller ports running from all the way from Oshawa to Saguenay to Thunder Bay, for example, are as integral to their communities as the large ports are, and in fact play a big role in the economic development of their communities, but also just in the investment of their communities. So Oshawa brings in the road salt, for example. Saguenay is actually receiving cruise passengers during the summertime. It's a huge investment in the communities. Reality is that they have the same needs for expansion and growth and investment as the large ports do, and in fact in some cases have a bit of an extra challenge by virtue of their size of getting to the financing portion to be able to be able to grow.
I'm not going to put you on the spot because you can't be political, but I can be political. And I would just say that in my experience, every province in this country understands, including Alberta and Saskatchewan, understands the importance of having ports, except for one, and that's Ontario. So perhaps the government can hear me when I say that they should be talking to their cousins about issues around ports and great investments that can happen in Ontario. So I did the politics. You don't have to, but you can follow up with facts and figures on it. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Matt, very much, Ms. Reid. Ms. O'Connell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to probably sound like a broken record to my colleagues here, but for Mr. Lehman, in terms of the application process of budgeting for municipalities and infrastructure, I did, I think, over 10 budgets when you combine municipal and then my regional. The issue is not, you talked about the stable funding, but also, and having these parameters, because we've heard actually from some witnesses that are like, don't just freely give cash to municipalities to spend however they like. Even under the gas tax program, there are strict parameters, and you are audited by AMO and FCM to ensure that, in Ontario anyways, it's AMO, to ensure that you meet compliance. But one of the funding models that's missing, or one of the parameters that's missing that we always found was an issue in Durham, was eligibility for getting project shovel ready. The cost to do the engineering for a road or a bridge or the environmental assessments and those costs are not eligible as a total project cost, but they can be sometimes millions of dollars for a visionary project. Have the large Urban Mayors Caucus taken a position on, not only not moving away from application process, but expanding the eligibility so it can actually, the funds can actually go towards the total cost of the project and not just the shovels in the ground?
So thank you very much for that question. It's very insightful. Yes, we would like to see the design costs, the upfront costs included. There's a lot of focus on the word shovel because we all think about the construction aspect. But infrastructure, of course, has knock-on benefits. I mean, the goods that we use, the cement, the steel, everything else has to be manufactured. There are manufacturing jobs. There are the jobs that spin out of the manufacturing jobs. There are also, as you say, the professional, scientific, and technical jobs that are created in engineering and so forth by the eligible architecture and so forth, the eligibility of design costs. So when you are investing in infrastructure, there are broad-ranging impacts across the economy, and the change you suggest, which we do support, would absolutely broaden the economic impact of the infrastructure investment.
Thank you. Do I have time? Yeah. Thank you. Just following up on that, affordable housing. Ontario is in a different situation than other provinces because it is solely a municipal funding. I don't know for Barrie or there, but just the backlog in terms of investment in the current stock, let alone building new. How do we get around the fact of ensuring that all provinces are relatively treated equal, given the fact that there are provincial differences in the amounts of funding? So, for example, if the federal government gives funding for affordable housing, but if Ontario doesn't kick in and it's a municipal, then how do we get that balance in comparison to, let's say, other provinces who invest?
It's a fair question. I don't have an answer for other provinces, as my caucus is Ontario. I would tell you that the equity can be, I believe, designed through the type of funding that the CMHC provided in the 80s and 90s. The approach that saw the assistance, the per-door approach, is straightforward. Again, if we're focused on results and on evidence-based spending and policy, then that kind of approach, if you follow it all the way through, regardless of whether you're partnering with a province, a regional authority in Ontario or Alberta or a municipality, the end result should be the same. I think that's the best answer I can give you.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I'm not going to... No, it's just actually, could you provide us or us the, I don't know if it's FCM or whomever might have it, but more details on the per-door approach and
Absolutely.
the CMHC study? Thank you.
Okay, just provide it to the clerk and she'll give it to committee members. Mr. Elbutov.
Thank you. I do have a couple of comments to make on Monsieur Dussault. I don't definitely don't agree on the that poverty is a cause of low minimum wage and a call for increase on low minimum wage because or the expand on CPP. Relatively, all that is going to end up on the lap of taxpayers or consumers, basically. So relatively, that's going to cause additional poverty and rather at some points some kind of inflation that is unfavorable by economic measures. The question to Wendy or Ms. Zatolny, if I'm said it right, the question is. You're calling on federal government to investment in ports. It's part of the infrastructure plan, maybe, to keep upgrading, updating, and be on top of things when it comes to such an important transportation or supply management. The question is, have you considered private investment? Has been attracted enough for private investment to come and invest in such things instead of using public money?
Well, in fact, it's not an either-or. Private investment plays a very large part in any port development or port infrastructure projects. But as I mentioned earlier, port financing models for their infrastructure projects really are sort of a patchwork quilt. They're almost like P6s. Private sector financing is an important part of that, as is, however, municipal, provincial, and federal.
Go ahead, and just Mr. Gupta, we haven't forgot about you. You're still on our monitor here, so if there's questions for you, fire ahead. Anyone, go ahead, Mr. Abutov.
I guess on affordable housing, I mean, investment calls on the government or federal government to invest in affordable housing. Again, I'm in favor of private investment on that under the P3, rather just use the money of a private sector instead of using public money. I'm not sure if there's any comment from Mr. Lehman on that.
So in terms of public-private investment in our, yes. I'm actually a big supporter of that, and you will find many supporters among the large Mayor's Caucus of Ontario. We had some concerns with mandatory P3 screens, but I believe that you are watching municipalities already implement a variety of triple P approaches, and they are relevant not just for the largest projects. This is something that I think is a misconception. P3 Canada has done excellent work to try and encourage medium-sized cities across the country to be innovative with projects. Regina has built a bridge. We were able to build a bus a maintenance facility by bundling it with an operating contract. And that has worked very, very well. So I would actually encourage the use of those tools to continue to be explored.
Okay, turning to Mr. Ouellette.
Thank you very much. My next question is actually for Alexandre Lorrain. Just une couple de questions.
I just have a couple of questions for you about the lack of equality between households. Can that have an impact on the health of people? Can it make their health worse or better, depending on the inequality in incomes between households? Well, yes, there will be social costs of inequality, income inequality, especially if that gap is too large. I would just make a quick comment, though. Income inequality is important. However, one mustn't forget that in Canada, from 35 to 40% of the GDP is government services. So health, education, there are many government services, and that's 35 to 40% of our GDP. These are services that are universal services. So yes, there may be income inequality. However, the government does a pretty good job in this country in combating that lack of equality by supplementing income, for example, through its various programs, but also through its government services. Well, I was just asking myself the question, because it's all very well to speak of a brain drain towards the United States, but there's also the issue of quality of life. And that's very important to consider as well. So I think it's more subtle than simply just saying that there may be, for example, only economic reactions. People are thinking of more than that, and there's the quality of life. Yes, and it's very important to keep those things in mind. In the early 2000s, there was a study done on brain drain, and actually the most important reason talented people were remaining in Canada was because they preferred the social climate in the country. So yes, that is an important point to make.
The president of the Canadian Port Authorities. I was just wondering if you could talk about the Port of Churchill. I think there's some. It's an Arctic port. It's one of the ones that is inland or quite farther inland, and some of the difficulties it's facing, and perhaps some of the potential solutions.
Well, first of all, I have to say that the Port of Churchill is a private port. It is not a port authority, so they actually don't fall under our jurisdiction. However, they face, I suspect, a lot of the same kinds of challenges that many of the ports do around climate change and being able to find an operating season that allows them to be profitable. My understanding right now of the port is they have a limited shipping season simply because of their location and winter, and so they have, as I said, similar challenges to the rest of Canada's ports.
And so you've mentioned that you operate 18 or 15 ports?
18 port authorities, yes.
And why are you no longer operating the Port of Churchill?
That was a federal government decision to when it devolved the various ports and harbors. There were an original 17, now 18, that were considered of strategic significance and were devolved into port authorities, which are shared governance organizations related to the federal government. The federal government at the time made the decision to allow the Port of Churchill to go private.
Got you there, Mr. Ouellette. I do have to ask one question to Mr. Gupta, and that is, how difficult is it to get to the so-called last mile? I mean, there's a number of us here from rural areas, and what we're finding in rural areas, we are losing endless business opportunities because we don't have the broadband for those businesses to operate in the modern world. I see the information highway as important as the railway was at one point in time. And so how difficult is it or expensive is it to get to that so-called last mile, if I could put it that way?
I think, thank you for the question. In today's environment, it should not be, that difficult because the satellite transmission and the wireless side has come down, particularly if you start looking at next generation 5G network. Like today, most networks in Canada can only transfer, 400 megabytes, at a high speed. When you go to the 5G, you're talking 10 gigabytes or terabyte kind of a movement. So those networks costs are coming down, and that's why we start to look at investing in next generation networks. And also, as you invest on infrastructure, the physical infrastructure. And when I talk to the P3 people working on the private-public partnership, every time there is a construction going on, laying the fiber down in the ground along with it should be almost mandatory. If you're making holes and digging for pipes and roads, put a fiber down as it happens. And reaching that last mile is a lot easier now. Cost has come down tremendously, and satellite transmissions are also equally cheaper nowadays to reach to the extreme remote areas.
Thank you very much for that information, and I'll have to quickly thank the witnesses. Very productive morning in terms of information. Wish you all the best, and the committee will reconvene at 3:30 at 253, 12:30 at 253D, 12:30. And grab a bite to eat in your lobby, or you'll go hungry. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.